Hey guys, tonight we slip out of the lit room and into a night that smells like pine smoke and damp earth. The sky is a black bowl, stars salted across it, and the only light is the low, breathed glow of embers cupped in a ring of stones. You hear insects winding down a distant owl and your own careful breathing. A quick reality check. You probably won't survive this if you wander off alone because, in the dark, every rustle has teeth and your phone's flashlight is at 0% as usual. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments so we can see how far this little circle of firelight stretches across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch by the fire and feel the real power people label Caveman humming in the coals like a quiet engine. It isn't raw biceps, not really. It's attention. It's patience. It's the way a band of tired humans shares focus eyes at the edge, hands toward the heat mines in the same place. Power here is the art of choosing where to look, when to wait, and how to act together. You feed a twig. Listen for the shift in the flame's tone and realize this is a classroom without walls. One direction, fuel moisture, the soft grammar of sparks. A joke floats across the circle like an ember, something about the stew being smoked a little too enthusiastically, and you feel shoulders loosen. Good humor is a tool. It oils the hinge of the night. Mainstream fact time calmly, like the slow exhale of a coal. Archaeologists have uncovered ancient hearths at sites such as Gesher Benot Yaakov in the Jordan Valley, where burned flint and charred plant remains, dated to hundreds of thousands of years ago, point to repeated controlled fire. That means ordinary people, not movie cavemen, with club subscriptions, tended flames cooked food, and organized their evenings long before there were calendars to hang on cave walls. Fire isn't just heat, it's a clock, a dinner bell, a perimeter alarm, and let's be honest, a moody, flattering light that makes even your leaf and hide fit look couture. Historians still argue whether fire mastery bloomed once and spread like gossip, or sparked independently in different places, as bands solved the same problem with different kindling. Either way, the outcome is here in front of you, a manageable sun edited down to pocket size. You think of the day's small victories, a root roasted until its bitterness melts away, a shard of stone struck into a working edge, the steady rhythm of footsteps that brought the group home before the light died. Pro tip from 50,000 BCE, if the smoke keeps following you, congratulations, you're the main character. The joke lands soft because the fire softens everything. Voices, silhouettes, and stomachs rumbling like lazy drums. Even predators keep their distance, not because they've read the safety manual, but because a ring of humans sitting this close, breathing. This steady radiates the one thing that scares every hunter confidence. Quirky tidbit glowing like a hideaway ember. People once carried live fire in slow-burning fungus-soft amadou, cradled in bark or hide so the next camp didn't begin from nothing. Utsi the Iceman much later had tinder fungus tucked away, but the trick is older than his mountain nap. Picture it, an ember like a sleeping red coin, packed and fed with breath traveling miles through star-stippled dark, so breakfast tomorrow doesn't start with bruised knuckles and sore hopes. That's a quiet power, often mistaken for magic continuity. Not strength that explodes, but warmth that persists. Your gym membership has excellent kettlebells, sure, but does it offer fire-to-go thought so? The light polishes faces and reveals the quiet hierarchy of a tiny nation. The elder sorts the day's noise into meaning with a voice as unhurried as smoke. The best listener nods first, setting the tempo of agreement. A child prods the edge of shadow with a glowing stick, learning where safety grades into maybe not. The forager lists water signs, the taste of silt, the tilt of willow leaves in the same matter-of-fact tone a barista lists milks. The hunter admits missing a throw and gets gently roasted like a tuber, which feels appropriate. Humor is glue and humility is wick. You sense how everything that matters is shared. Food vigilance stories blame credit. Power isn't hoarded in a single set of shoulders, it circulates like heat. The fire teaches timing. Too much fuel and it chokes. Too little and it sulks. Same with plans. Wait for wind, read the sparks. Notice how a feather of smoke threads toward the low-pass weather whispering through the valley's chimney. You don't need a textbook. The stones speak and the air answers. You learn to bank coals like savings, to bend flame with the wind your hands make to cook roots near the rim while the center keeps the night politely at bay. When you tend well, the fire looks effortless, like a violin performance that hides all the practice. That too is power technique repeated until it becomes calm. You shift, and the night shifts with you. Somewhere a hyena giggles at a joke you didn't tell. You grin anyway. 3 easy jokes per camp is unofficial tradition, one about the clumsy throw, one about the smoky stew, and one about the time someone mistook a firefly for ancestor spirits texting. It happens. Notifications are slow out here. Beneath the comedy, your senses braid themselves to the group. Someone counts breaths. Someone counts stars. Someone watches the silence, which is the most important watch of all. You can feel your pulse sinking to the same slow metronome as the people around you. A spark jumps. A hand is already there with sand. A story starts without anyone announcing it. The river is a sleeping animal tonight, someone says, and every face tilts the same way because you all know which boulder they mean. The one shaped like a whale that tells you, in its whale way, where the channel swings deeper. Stories aerate fear. They let it rise like bread and bake into something nourishing. They make knowledge portable, a route, a warning, a memory of a thorn thicket where guinea fowl roost, and an old lesson about not stepping backward near that crumbly ledge. Tomorrow's plan is being rehearsed in whispers and laughter, every detail getting a little smoother each time it circles the ring. Power, you realize, is the gentle tyranny of good habits. Keep the fire banked. Keep the edges watched. Keep food moving hand to hand instead of hoarded. Calories are like passwords. Share them with the right people and your security actually improves. You warm a palm, check the stars through the smoke lattice, and let the evening teach its quiet syllabus. If a thought leaps too far, the group sands it smooth. If courage flags the rhythm of small tasks, winds it back up. The shyest voice gets a turn because silence here is not a lack, it's a resource like dry kindling saved. You lean back and hear the sound that marks the end of the first watch. Not a drum, but a synchronized sigh when people agree without speaking. The camp settles. The listeners at the edge trade places, and the coals are tucked like children. Your reality check returns for a drowsy encore. Step out alone and you're a snack. Step in together and you're a system. Firelight shows faces, not muscles, and the real power of Caveman is the collective skill of staying calmly alert. In this small ring of light, you begin to understand that strength isn't what crushes, it's what steadies. And as the ember glow breathes and the stars tilt you steady with it, ready for the long night and whatever it brings, you leave the ring of fire and step into a pale morning that will by noon turn the world into an oven. The ground is a notebook of hooves, a split cloven print, a deeper toe in the sand, a scuffed brush where a tail flicked. You jog not fast, just stubborn and easy chest loose rhythm, and you feel the family design at work. Long tendons storing and releasing energy, like little bows, a springy arch that rolls you forward, a thick Achilles that loves repetition more than drama. Your head stays stable because a Nuchal ligament ties it down like a guy line on a tent. Running becomes a metronome in 2-3 out 2-3. You don't chase with speed, you chase with time. Mainstream fact, tucked into your stride like a pebble in your palm. Persistence hunting, stalking an antelope through heat, until it overheats, has been documented among Kalahari sand hunters who move in relay or somalo for hours, then close in when the animal's cooling systems stall. It isn't mythology. Researchers filmed it and timed it, and the midday sun does half the work by turning fur into a sauna. You bare-skinned and glossy with sweat dump heat, better than many mammals, because your body trades fur for vents, millions of them. You are a radiator with opinions. Historians still argue whether this strategy was common across ancient landscapes or a specialized trick of arid savannas, but the mechanics make sense out here where shade is stingy and wind has a long runway. The track bends toward stunted thorn and into a wash of paler sand. Your tracker's brain, the same one that read sparks last night, reads microgrammar in the ground. A print atop a beetle track means recent. A damp, dark crescent in the hoof says he stumbled. A tuft of hair on a twig says he panicked. You slow when the wind dies, speed up when it wakes, and you laugh under your breath because your modern smartwatch would like to offer you caveman mode, which is just breathe and look. Joke 1 delivered to yourself like a mint. By late morning, the sun leans heavy. You start to run, walk, trot to the next bushwalk, to the next shadow. The animal keeps moving because stopping near a predator is a bad look on any resume. You keep moving because stopping hard means heat pools in your muscles, like soup thickening. You keep your mouth small to save moisture. Swallow a careful sip from an ostrich eggshell flask you carried from camp. A real thing? People use old as any canteen decorated with quiet little scratches to mark family and root. That eggshell is your banked ember cousin, a liquid fire to go, and the callback makes you grin. Quirky tidbit because the road likes surprises. Some long-distance foragers in hot deserts dab charcoal or ash on skin, not as fashion, but as matte. Less glare, fewer. Bites a kind of low-tech sunscreen and fly deterrent. You smear a thumb of it across your nose, and congratulations, you just invented face paint for people who are very serious about not becoming a buffet. Yes, your look is runway hyena chic. No, there's no actual runway. Your companions fan out loosely, which is the way to stay together without tripping on each other's feet. One calls when the spore fades, a low click of tongue and palate the human sonar. Another points to a brush where a bird has alarm called. You file that ping next to the darkened droplet of urine that says the antelope is exhaling heat so hard it is losing more than sweat. The body you're chasing is your teacher in absentia. It sprints, then it must pant. Panting cools by moving air, but running and panting share the same airway, so something has to give. You meanwhile cool while moving sweat wicks, breeze licks, and your inner furnace keeps humming. It's unfair, but nature doesn't do fair. It does physics. Here comes joke 2, a soft one somewhere. Ahead, the antelope checks its 5K. Split sees personal worst and files a complaint with the sun, who responds with an out-of-office message currently melting everyone equally. You step over a root, let your shoulders drop an inch, and keep the breath small and steady. Being patient is harder than being brave. You notice that and tuck it away like a secret. Mainstream biomechanics hum in your bones. Homo erectus, your long-legged relative from around 1.9 million years ago, carried a rib cage that let the torso twist a pelvis shaped for stride stability and a big gluteus maximus that fires hardest when running. That backside is less about sitting and more about staying upright while your foot hits ground, your built-in Steadicam. Historians still argue whether those runners' traits emerged primarily for hunting or for efficient scavenging and long-distance walking between patchy resources. But whichever way the debate tilts over the coals of evidence, the outcome under your feet is the same: you can keep going. A low hill rises more a suggestion than a command. On its crest, heat makes the air shimmy like clear jelly. You crest it, scan, and there, flicker of tan, the snap of a tail. The animal bolts, because that is what bodies do when fear taps their shoulder. You don't sprint, you click back into the metronome. The point isn't to catch speed, it's to catch time. Joke 3 is tiny and private. Your knees file a polite letter to management, requesting alternative career paths, and management replies. Thank you for your feedback. We value your enthusiasm. The ground roughens into gravel that skitters underfoot. You adapt, shorten the stride, let the foot land soft like a question. Your shadow grows thick and short. The sun is a coin pressed to the crown of your skull. This would be unbearable if you fought it, but you surf it instead. You learn the trick of not caring about the finish while never losing it. You remember last night's smoky stew and let the memory act like a fuel tablet dissolving into your blood. You remember the ember coin of tinder fungus traveling pocket to pocket, and you become that ember small, stubborn, and quietly hot. You call and your friend answers. The distance between voices is a ruler better than any GPS. You angle left because the wind tells you it will press scent that way. You angle right because the land drops into a shallow bowl where air stagnates and turns hot as breath. The antelope takes that bowl and regrets it halfway through. Its engine red lines. You know this not because you can see molecules, but because the spore stutter's deep shallow skewed a panic metronome. Historians still argue whether our ancestors preferred this solo chase or did more often a coordinated drive with groups funneling animals. But out here, the tactics blur like heat haze. Whatever works stays in the bag. Quirky aside then, back to the pulse. There's an old runner's trick. Some desert travelers keep a smooth pebble in the mouth, not to hydrate it, doesn't but to cue slow saliva and keep the tongue from going full sandpaper. It's more theater than chemistry. Yet theater can help the body remember calm. You use the pebble not because you must, but because rituals oil the machine that is you. The final minutes feel like hours poured thin. The antelope wavers stands, bolts stops classic sign of a cooling system out-negotiated. You come in, careful, respectful, grateful, because power out here is for surviving, not for gloating. The group closes like a lens. Lunch is a logistical plan, not a feast, shade first, water next, gratitude third. You work fast to reduce suffering. Then you work patient to make sure nothing is wasted, and the landscape remains a future you can live in. When you finally sit, the wind combs sweat from your arms and turns it into a small chill. You chew a sliver of salt-dried meat, saved from earlier yesterday's patience, paying today's bills, and pass the eggshell canteen with the same unspoken etiquette as last night's stew. You look back along the route, a ribbon of signs that now points the other way toward home. Your feet throb with a sensible ache. Your mind hums with that quiet choir you heard by the fire, and you understand why endurance was the original confidence. Not the noisy burst, but the competence to keep showing up until the world yields something edible. Under a sky that blazes like a forge, you cool slowly. And in the cool, you feel the real power against steadiness that outlasts speed. You arrive back at the Ring of Stones with the afternoon still bright, and you can feel the moment a scattered trio becomes a camp again. Bare souls kiss dust in different accents. Someone is braiding cordage. Someone pokes the coals you banked this morning, and someone else scans the thorn edge with that relaxed, no-big-deal vigilance you secretly envy. Power here isn't a single flexing bicep. It's 10 quiet competencies that interlock until the whole group feels taller than its tallest person. You lower the day's bundle and the choreography starts without anyone announcing it. There's an etiquette to food that predates law books. Hands don't grab, they offer. Voices stay even because calm is contagious. A child jogs toward the seep with an ostrich eggshell flask. Yes, the portable fire-to-go of water, and the elder assigns tasks in the same tone used for bedtime stories and thorn extractions. Mainstream fact among many modern foragers, like the hadza and the Jew huanzi meat from a large kill, is shared widely across households. Who shot it matters less than the rule that full bellies tonight mean help tomorrow when luck rotates. You might hear about an owner of the arrow deciding cuts, or watch the famous leveling custom of insulting the meat where a braggy haunch is teased as skinny, so egos don't rewrite policy. It sounds like comedy, but it's social engineering done with a wink. Your job right now is edges. Watching the edges means listening with your skin. You notice when birds go quiet, when a dog pricks its ears, when wind that smelled like sage now smells like wet fur. Cooperation isn't only passing bowls, it's weaving a net of attention. Daylight has its rhythm. Somebody's always on sentinel, somebody's always on fire, somebody's always on kids. Joke 1 drifts across like smoke. Unofficial camp motto: we before me plus snacks. The grin you share is small but strategic. Smiles are little treaties. Mainstream fact: warm as the coals in a well-known sleep study of the Hadza researchers found that through most nights at least one person is awake, which means the camp almost never experiences total simultaneous sleep. Staggered bedtimes, light sleepers, and fussy infants create a rolling guard without anyone posting a formal sentry. That's the opposite of Lion's glorious nap champions, terrible neighbors. Historians still argue whether this sentinel sleep stretches back into the deep Pleistocene or is a flexible response to modern risks. But your eyelids remember the pattern either way. The pot begins to whisper. You smell marrow and roasted tuber, a smoky sweetness that feels like the day unclenching its jaw. Cooperation tastes like seasoning. It lets you turn a tough-cut tender, a sparse pantry, generous, a risky landscape, negotiable. Someone knows the ash trick that takes bitterness out of this root. Someone else knows the leaf that calms stomachs if you overdo it. The group is a library where the books shelve themselves. You ladle carefully, and the first portion goes to people with the most immediate need: nursing mother elder, with the cough the runner, whose legs still hum from the chase. The rule is not written, but it is remembered in hands. Quirky tidbit, because partnership extends beyond humans. In parts of East Africa, people call wild honey-guide birds with a distinctive trill or whistle. The birds, in turn, lead humans to hidden hives. Humans crack the comb share wax and leftovers, and everyone gets dessert without collecting 1,000 stings. A cross-species handshake, older than any map app. Imagine a button on your phone labeled Summon Bird Guide Desserts Only. You add a fingertip of honey to a tuber slice and call it balance. The elder's story tonight isn't really a story. It's a ledger sung under the breath. Who owes whom a favor? Who accepted a gift and will return it later? Who is courting whom? Who needs extra hands for tomorrow's water haul? Not petty plumbing. Remember the runs relay trot walk trot. You hear the same tempo in the way obligations move. If one household has more today, it counts as investment, not trophy. Mainstream anthropological idea gift networks, like the Ju Hoansi Aixaro system, bind far-flung friends so that in bad years, help has a road to travel. Historians still argue whether prehistoric bands were uniformly egalitarian or carried shifting situational hierarchies: prestige for the best tracker one week, for the best mediator the next. But in this firelight, leadership behaves like flame. Whoever has dry fuel and good timing carries it for a while, then passes it on. Dusk loosens the edges of things. You take second watch. The rotation feels like jazz, loose but reliable. Someone with an infant beds down early. Someone who napped volunteers for midnight. The fire breathes slower, and you practice an art. You're getting good at being calm without being inert. Joke 2 keeps you company. If you wore a smartwatch, it would congratulate you on achieving 8,000 microvigilance points. Your reward is not being surprised by a hyena, which feels like a premium perk. Between breaths, information circulates like a bowl. Someone murmurs about a stranger seen at the far spring. Someone else mentions the stranger wore beads from the Red Quarry, which reads, "Trader not raider." The group chews this slowly like a fibrous root information, then flavor, then decision. You think of yesterday's pebble in the mouth trick and realize camp talk is the social version. Keeps the tongue moist, keeps panic from cracking. A small disagreement flickers how to portion what's left, whether to push toward the high ridge tomorrow or circle back to the reeds. The debate stays ordinary. That's a skill to conflict at room temperature. A leveling joke punctures a boast before it inflates. Careful that tuber just blushed and the boast joins the stew where all the flavors mingle. Historians still argue whether ancient camps had formal chiefs or rotated authority by task. Best on spore leads, the track best negotiator handles, strangers best storyteller keeps morale. But however the titles moved, the work moved with them. You remember the lessons printed on your ankles from the run. One body is fragile. Many bodies coordinated are weatherproof. Carrying heavy things becomes a relay. Crossing a river becomes a plate of arms. Even fear becomes manageable when 5 people name it and then take turns holding it. Mainstream fact. You can feel in your bones, human sociality often clusters around bands of a few dozen, with wider webs extending to roughly 100 plus. Your familiar Dunbar-ish neighborhood, which maps well onto the size at which gossip still works, as law and favors still travel before they spoil. Another small aside as you poke the coals, someone draws a quick stripe of ochre across a child's forehead. Less ceremony than sticky note, you're watched. You belong. The kid preens the camp smiles, and you file away the thought that symbols are shortcuts for trust. You'll see that scaled up later in those midnight cathedrals of pigment and echo on stone. Night doesn't crash, it settles. With it settles the logic of little agreements that beat big teeth. A leopard's strength ends at its paws. Your strength flows along conversations, favors glances and laughter. Remember the eggshell canteen, the ember coin of tinder fungus, the pebble trick? Tools are helpful, but the real tech is timing people. A breeze flips, the smoke angle changes, and you nudge a log a finger's width. The entire mood improves. Cooperation is that micro adjustments that keep macro trouble far away. From the dark comes a hyena's wavering giggle. You answer by doing nothing dramatic and everything together. Joke 3 is a whisper you save for yourself. Congratulations, you have successfully not been eaten again. 5-star review for teamwork. You pass the warmed sitting stone to the next pair of hands and lie down to a composite heartbeat. A cough, a murmur, a log settling. As your breath lengthens, you understand why claws and fangs never impressed you as much as company. Claws are useful. Coordination is civilization. You drift on that small, stubborn ember of certainty. The same ember that rode camp to camp in sleeping fungus, that you survive because you synchronize. You thrive because you share in the dark. For all its teeth, always respects a circle that keeps its rhythm. You sit with the coals at your back and a river cobble on your knee, and the ground around you glitters with yesterday's ideas. Crescent flakes, little moons of glassy stone the snowdrift called debitage. You turn the cobble, slowly tilting it to the firelight, the way a jeweler courts a gem, except your gem is a future edge hiding inside a nondescript lump. You find a platform, the spot that will agree to break, and set your hammerstone against it. The strike is small, quick, and committed. The stone pops with that satisfying bottle thunk called conchoidal fracture, and a flake skates into your palm, still warm from physics. That heat is your first applause. Joke 1 arrives on cue. Your very first hand axe looked like a potato with ambitions. But look at you now, Michelangelo, but for rocks. Mainstream fact, steady as a wrist. Some of the oldest known stone tools, the Oldowan, show up more than 2.5 million years ago at places like Gona in Ethiopia and Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. They're simple cores and flakes, but the butchery marks they left on bones aren't simple at all. Clean. Confident slices layered over or under tooth marks, in patterns that tell time like a forensic clock. A flake is not a shrug, it's a plan you can hold. Historians still argue whether these earliest kit makers were our genus proper or close cousins who taught us the trick by example and opportunity. But the rhythm, the look, the strike, the result, feels universal once you learn it. You rotate the core, read the angles like a weather report, and strike again. Your offhand cups the stone so the force travels and exits where you want. Your grip is a sentence with punctuation, comma here, period there. hard hammer quartzite to open soft hammer antler bone or dense hardwood to refine, percussion for bulk pressure for whisper-thin adjustments. You're not just making a cutter, you're making future time. A sharp flake shrinks the hours it takes to open a carcass, scrape a hide, harvest reeds, split a root. That time adds up into evenings for singing, flirting, teaching the same way cooking once converted chew time into thought time. Strike by strike, technology becomes a savings account. Soon, the cobble begins to confess symmetry. Where Aldewan is opportunistic, Acheulean is opinionated by faces shaped on both sides, edges drawn deliberately into teardrops, ovates, and ficrons. Mainstream fact wide as a savanna. Acheulean hand axes spread across Africa and into parts of Europe and Asia roughly from 1.7 million years ago for a staggeringly long run. Some are so exacting, you can feel the template living in the maker's mind. Left edge mirrors, right tip balances, butt thickness tapers, like a rule you could teach with your eyes closed. Historians still argue whether that symmetry signals aesthetics, ergonomics, social display, or all of the above. Maybe it's a resume you can throw proof of patience and planning. And yes, there's a cheeky, sexy hand axe hypothesis that says mate. Choice smiled on makers who could turn chaos into clean geometry. You don't need to sell the romance angle tonight, but you do turn your flake to catch the light like a wink. Quirky tidbit glints from the spoil heap. Archaeologists sometimes find giant hand axes, comically large showpieces, far too heavy for daily butchery. Are they ritual props, teaching boards prestige flexes, or the nappy equivalent of an overclocked gaming rig? The debate hums on, but you have seen the camp's version already. Someone carves a perfect piece, and the rest of you insult the hand axe the way you insult the meat. Cute doorstop. The leveling laughter grants status while filing down the edge of arrogance. Power stays in the circle, not in one pair of hands. You wipe grit from your lips with the back of your wrist, the same wrist that steadied a spear yesterday, the same wrist that will hold a baby tomorrow and prepare a core the level Huawei. This is a different trick, not carving the tool itself, but sculpting a core so that later one surgical strike releases a flake pre-shaped like a knife blade. You're designing negative space, you're inventing the future, and then peeling it free. Mainstream fact level Wa prepared core technology appears in the Middle Stone Age, Middle Paleolithic, roughly 300,000 years ago, in multiple regions. A brainstorm that spreads like fire carried in fungus. Historians still argue whether that spread is cultural exchange, convergent invention, or both. But any way you nap it, the method demands second-order thinking. You plan the plan. By now, the ground has turned into a syllabus. A novice's learning mistakes hinge, fractures, step scars, crushed platforms tell you where teaching lives. The best teachers in camp don't hover. They narrate with their hands slow enough for eyes to drink. You remember how your teacher would clap your shoulder before the strike, so you'd breathe, not brace. Don't fight the stone, they'd say. Invite it. Your own apprentice is watching you now, with the expression of someone trying to steal a magic trick frame by frame. You exaggerate a tiny movement so they can see it, the pre-strike wobble that sets the flake's path. And when the flake pops clean, you keep your face as plain as the horizon. Joke 2 sits down beside you, wearing a friendly smirk. Your imaginary crafting app flashes. Are you sure you want to nap? There is no undo button, only more practice and a larger pile of teachable glitter. Edges alone are good. Edges married to handles are better. Hafting the union of stone and shaft turns a sharp idea into a durable limb. Quirky tidbit. You can almost smell long before fancy glues. People made pitch by cooking birch bark in low oxygen, dripping out a black sweet sour resin that grips like a promise. Stone resin sinew, twist press cure by the fire, and a loose flake becomes a spear point with opinions. Some folks chewed that pitch like gum, leaving tooth marks, and much later, tiny time capsules of DNA and diet. You will not be mailing a spit kit to any lab tonight, but the knowledge that a glue can double as candy is very on brand for your species. Historians still argue whether the first hafted points were born of hunting needs or scavenging demands, safer distance from teeth. Yet the outcome is the same: reach grows. You try heat 2 tucking stubborn stone near the coals to temper its mood before flaking the way you warmed last night's tubers to sweeten them. Red stone deepens to cherry. Flakes come away silkier, less prone to sulk and step. You bank the coals afterward. There's that ember coin again, because nothing you do in this camp lives alone. The fire that cooks also tempers flint. The glue you love springs from bark. You also use as a rain note. The cord you twist tonight is the same gesture you'll use to calm a crying child. Technology isn't a separate chapter. It's the handwriting of your day. A scrap of hide becomes sandpaper to dress the edge. A sliver of bone becomes a pressure flaker to stitching tune the serrations. You slice a thread of plant fiber to show your apprentice why sharp is a feeling, not a boast. A drop of water beads on the blade and then slides. You nod satisfied and hand it over. The apprentice almost drops it, stares and whispers something that is half gratitude and half stage fright. You remember your first good piece and the way the world seemed suddenly to have more doors. Joke 3 soft shoes into frame. Your non-existent influencer channel is called Rocks That Slap, and today's upload is just your hands and the soft ASMR clack of competence. Comments are closed because hyenas keep spamming with links. You grin toward the dark, then stand to stretch. Your shoulders creak, but your mind feels new, like you've taken it to the gym and given it a patient workout. Visualize plan sequence, adjust finish. Before you sleep, you tidy the napping floor because feet and flakes are a bad romance. You keep a few big shards for tomorrow's scraping. You bank the rest under a thin sweep of dust, the camp's version of filing. If someone stumbles in the night, they won't meet razors. The coals purr. The hand axe you just made now lives not only in your pouch, but in the heads of everyone who watched you. And next week, their versions will live inside others, and soon a valley's worth of edges will match in ways that prove culture is a chain reaction that likes to leave evidence. As the fire breathes low, you feel proud in the right-sized way. Not the loud kind that wants a crown, but the quiet kind that fits your palm like a flake. Stone mines steal results. That's your evening. Tomorrow those edges will reduce risk, amplify food, and give the group a little more time for laughter, for teaching for that rolling guard of sentinel sleep, where no one is ever entirely alone. You roll onto your side the new tool, warm against your hip, and the last thing you hear is a soft click from the dark. Maybe a honey guide turning in its dreams before the whole camp slides into that practiced rhythm where even sleep is a shared craft. Evening stretches the camp into soft vowels. You listen to talk the way you listen to wind through grass texture, first, then meaning. Voices braid over the coals, and you realize this is the other fire you live by. Language, a flame that runs on breath. It warms reputations, cooks rumors until they're safe to swallow, and lights up paths in people's heads so tomorrow's choices don't happen in the dark. You don't merely speak. You groom each other with syllables smoothing tangles that hands can't reach. News cycles begin. Who saw the leopard's print by the reed bed? Who traded a strand of beads for a dried fish? Who tripped over the napping floor you forgot to tidy? Shh. We're not telling, but okay, you're telling. Joke 1 crackles politely. The camp newsletter writes itself. Headlines honey guide, promises dessert delivers. Runner reports, pebble in mouth life-changing. Meet insulted feelings. Noted harmony restored. Laughter does its small daily miracle of lowering shoulders without lowering vigilance. Mainstream fact, to tuck beside the fire primatologist turned anthropologist Robin Dunbar famously argued that human language scaled up from grooming to keep bigger groups stable. With words, one person can groom many at once. He linked conversational time to typical social group sizes, those bands and webs of roughly 100 plus, where gossip still works as law. You can feel the truth of that under your ribs, the way talk updates the group's internal map syncing expectations, the way last night's Sentinel sleep synced safety. Historians still argue whether gossip was the main driver of language's rise or one clever use among many, but here in Breath and Emberlight Gossip is governance. A quarrel starts and then doesn't. Two hunters both think they saw the antelope first. The disagreement threatens to climb a tree and throw fruit, but language reaches it with a ladder, a teasing insult. The meat routine trims the brag. A grandmother drops a proverb like a smooth stone into choppy water, and a patient narrator reconstructs the chase with enough detail for everyone to nod. No judge bangs a gavel. The camp finds a sentence it can live with, and the sentence is a sentence subject-verb-object relief. Your inner PR department stands down. The memory of your own clumsy throw is now officially weather-related. You notice how the register shifts with the task. Warnings are crisp like flint, short, high, repeated snake. Snake. Comfort is low and slow like coals nudged to last till dawn. Planning sits in the middle, sturdy and bland as a tuber designed to travel without spoiling. Language makes time portable. It lets you move yesterday's caution into tomorrow's ambush and next week's dry stream bed into today's detour. Words hold water better than baskets, and look, someone indeed taps an ostrich eggshell canteen. Just then, the camp's fire to go of drink while tapping a memory of the last time that spring ran bitter. Mainstream archaeological note for your quiet nerd heart. A Neanderthal hyoid bone from Kabara Cave looks strikingly like a modern human's. A hint that complex speech may not be your species' private toy. Ear bones and base of skull angles paint similar possibilities. Historians still argue whether Neanderthals commanded fully symbolic syntax-rich language or a robust proto-speech, because fossils don't fossilize grammar, but the physical potential flickers there like an ember behind a palm. However it began, what you ride now is a capacity for layered meaning that grows as fast as you can keep it fed. Quirky tidbit whistled across the valley. Some human communities use whistled speech. Think of the Canaries as silbo, or highland whistling in parts of Mexico and Turkey where everyday sentences are transposed into piercing melodies that carry over ridges like birds with opinions. You try a soft whistle toward the dark just for practice, and a hyena giggles back wrong audience right idea. In forests elsewhere, drums echo tonal languages, syllable for syllable. Communication stretches, shapeshifts, and still feels like home, because the payload is the same I'm here. Go there, we are us. Joke 2 pads by with gentle feet. Imagine the hyena starting a podcast titled Overheard Near the Fire, complete with spicy takes on your cooking. Toot smoky, not enough marrow forward notes. You offer the air a withering review laugh track overused, and the camp's perimeter remains admirably uneaten. Names tilt the night. A whispered name can summon a face, a debt, a path for help to travel. Language turns favors into accounts that don't need numbers. I'll bring reeds when I pass your spring, someone says, and everyone hears the interest accruing at the rate of trust. When strangers visit, the bead color gives it away. You switch to the politeness dialect that exchanges clues gently until you're sure their problems are compatible with your solutions. Your mouth is a multi-tool. It carves alliances as cleanly as your hand axe from rocks that slap carved edges. You watch kids learn the rules invisibly. A pair plays a game where one hides a pebble and the other asks yes-no questions that box the secret smaller and smaller until it fits in a fingertip. Their logic wrapped in giggles. Another pair repeats a tongue twister that trains their breath for long phrases without running out of air like jogging for the lungs. The camp's best storyteller tonight. It's the auntie who never drops a thread, slides from report to myth without a seam. She folds a map into a joke and a taboo into a rhythm. You'll catch yourself humming as you approach the cliff path that crumbles if you step backward. Language also reminds bodies how to be brave without being stupid. Someone sketches danger with spare nouns, deep mud hip high, and the picture arrives intact, saving hours and ankles. Someone else builds courage with future tense we will cross at first light, and the verb steadies the hand that knots the cordage. Words don't replace spears, but they do reduce the number of spears you need. That's efficiency, which, as you've discovered from persistence hunting and patient napping, is the quiet cousin of power. On the edge of the circle, two teens do the ancient human thing flirt by co-authoring a bit. They trade tiny mocks and rescues. He fumbles a phrase, she tosses him a better one, until their duet clicks. Joke 3 smiles drowsy, and kind language is cooperative multiplayer, where the DLC is eye contact. Nearby, the elder mutters a lullaby whose syllables you don't parse, so much as float on. The melody is a slow river that carries a boat called You Are Safe. The scholar in your chest who refuses to sleep adds one more log to the debate fire. Historians still argue whether language sprang from a sudden neural rewire, accumulated in slow layers of calls and gestures, or blossomed under pressure from trade tool-making ritual, or all of these at once. You roll the thought in your mouth like last night's pebble, and decide that arguments are also a kind of glue. They keep attention warm, so answers have something to stick to. Around midnight, the camp drifts into that rolling, uneven sleep again, the sentinel rhythm that leaves at least one pair of ears open. You take your turn by talking softly to yourself, cataloging stars and promises. In the darkness, whispers feel bigger than shouts, and you realize why gossip so maligned in daylight earns its honorific here. It's not petty, it's preventative maintenance. It's how you keep heavy things light and light things from turning heavy. It's how we survive's eye. A brand new ember wakes a small orange thought under ash. You nudge it, and as the flame rises, you hear your own voice try a line, practice a cadence. Tomorrow someone will ask for a story, and you'll have one that balances warning and wonder in the length of a breath. For now, your tongue cools like stone near the coals. Your head finds that tidy language-shaped stillness, and the camp's soft grammar laughter murmurs sighs, writes itself into your bones as surely as any rule ever carved on rock. By the time stars salt the sky again, talk has thickened into story. You ease closer to the coals, feel their little draft on your shins, and watch the auntie with the never-lost thread draw a line in the sand with a charred stick. Language was the spark. Story is the fire you build, from it structured, fed, and aimed, so it throws light where the group needs it most. Tonight, it's a map you can walk with your eyes closed. Tomorrow, it might be a rule sung sweetly, so kids keep their fingers out of thorn hollows and crocodile mouths. Joke 1 warms its hands. We call that child safety through catchy bops. Certified earworm. 0 crocodiles invited. She begins with the ridge that looks like a sleeping hippo. You can see it even now, a black hump against deeper black. From there, she strings a path bead by bead, the wind gate where smoke leans north. The rock that whistles when the river is low, the termite mounds that mean tubers nearby. At each bead she pauses, and the camp answers in chorus, with a click or hum, the way your persistence hunt breath once marked time in 2, 3 out 2, 3. The story is a beat you can march by. If someone new is listening, the visitor with the red quarry beads, you hear the politeness dialect sneak in. The same map, softer teeth, more invitations than commands. Mainstream fact slides in like a steady note. Many Aboriginal Australian peoples carry navigation law and ancestry through songlines, routes sung across landscape features, so that a person can travel immense distances by remembering melody and verse. The land is a score, the body is the instrument. You feel that truth under your ribs now as your auntie modulates a small rise in pitch for the ridge, a fall for the waterhole, a tremble for the place where the bank collapses if you step backward. Historians still argue whether Paleolithic European cave art served similar mnemonic duties, map calendar, animal behavior manual, or whether it leaned more toward ritual theater and altered state visions. We weren't there to sell tickets, but the way stories cling to landmarks suggests memory loves a hook. It can grab with both hands. The stick draws an X in the sand, and everyone murmurs a little taboo into being. Here no timbero. The reason is unglamorous wind funnels and burns the grass wrong, but the story dresses it in a scrap of myth, so it sticks the wind spirit naps there and hates hot breath. You smile because this is efficiency in costume. Rules travel farther when they bring snacks. The insult the meat laughter you know so well shows up as tease the rules someone jokes that the wind spirit also hates your cousin singing, which is comically plausible, and the taboo lands without bruising anyone's ego. Quirky tidbit wanders in with a loop of chord across the world. People have used string figures, yes, cats cradle cousins to narrate events and teach sequences, knot by knot. In the Arctic, a tale might arrive cued by fingers and looped patterns that change shape as the plot turns the same way your napping teacher once choreographed edges with bone and antler. You try a small figure of your own loop twist pull, and it becomes two triangles side by side like camps, linked by a trade agreement. If only your Rocks That Slap channel had a sister series called Strings That Explain. Joke two bows politely. Comment section still closed. Hyenas discovered thread and will not stop posting bone emojis. The auntie blows a thin thread of ochre dust across the hand of the nearest child, leaving a soft halo practice for tomorrow's stencils when you reach the shallow cave by the reeds. Handprints there will not be art in the museum sense. They are roll call promise, maybe even route markers pointing deeper in. Mainstream fact, glowing like coals, engraved ostrich eggshell fragments from deep time. Carry crosshatching that looks less like idle doodle and more like a family of signs containers, labeled memories, scratched into things you must carry anyway. You want water? You also get an archive. Your own eggshell canteen, the fire-to-go of drink bears little ticks the elder added seasons ago. You never asked what each meant, because you enjoyed learning by use which notch lines up with a star. Which notch means share more here, which notch means don't sleep in that dry river when the sky tastes of iron. The story slides to animals. Now quirks you must remember if you enjoy keeping your limbs. This bird alarms after the jackal, not before. That antelope jumps left when the wind is at its tail. The honey guide. Your dessert hotline prefers a trill that sounds like water poured into a gourd. You practice the trill and get only a whisper of a response. The auntie squeezes your shoulder and says, "Tomorrow," which is story for keep trying. The hyena's laugh lifts from the dark like an uninvited rim shot. The auntie doesn't miss a beat. "Hear that," she says. "That's the sound you don't follow." Joke 3 arrives carrying a lantern 5 stars on the camp's safety review. Would not follow hyena again. Some nights, the story includes a deliberate mistake. Auntie claims the cliff path is safe in rain. The camp, well-trained by years of maps, set to music hisses and corrects in chorus. This is ritualized quality control. Your ancestors invented peer review and hid it inside a bedtime tale. Somewhere, future scholars will call it distributed cognition, but you call it not falling off things. Historians still argue whether those repeated dots, ladder marks, and claviform signs in caves, Chauvet-Lascaux, Altamira, are tallies of hunts, lunar counts, vocal cues for chant, or entoptic patterns seen during trance. Maybe they are all of it at once layered uses pasted to the same wall, the way your camp uses one fire for cooking glue making and napping heat treat. Someone produces a bone with old notches, the sort of thing that later fields will nickname a Shango, and later still will spark arguments about lunar calendars versus simple tallies versus, frankly, a bored but meticulous person. The auntie spins a small origin out of it that the moon once loaned its ribs to humans as counting sticks, and you watch the idea slide neatly into a place your mind kept ready for it. Fringe or not, the tidbit carries a function. It links sky and number and night into one reachable braid. Tomorrow. When the question becomes how many days until the reeds release pollen, your fingers will remember. You notice how the story protects feelings as much as futures. The hunter who stumbled today becomes the bringer of comic relief in a way that lets him eat and sleep, not sit in shame. The forager who found the bitter root gets a new verse how ash turned no into yes. The group learns chemical know-how, wrapped in a compliment that keeps curiosity daring. Story is a diplomatic pouch. It circulates delicate cargo, sealed with rhythm and wink. As the tale relaxes into origins, your body lengthens into the cadence. You hear how night and day married, and then argued about the length of shadows, how fire was a stubborn child traded between trees until humans taught it to sit, how rivers learned manners by braiding around stones. Do you believe these? You believe the way they work. They load your head with high-contrast images so that when the real problem walks out of the grass, your hands already know the first move. Long before any temple, the cave wall was a hard drive for awe and a whiteboard for do this, not that. The auntie's closing is a soft knot, a promise to continue at the shallow cave if the wind stays sensible. You look down and realize your hands have been miming along, drawing, nodding, casting a little spell of muscle memory. You think of last night's pebble trick of the ember coin carried in sleeping fungus, of the way your feet wrote a slow song across noon's heat. All of it is story by other names. Breath coal rhythm root. You're not one person trying to hold a world. You're one page in a library that reads itself aloud every night until the binding never breaks. The coals settle. The map in the sand is smudged carefully on purpose. No invitations for the wrong pause. Your eyelids lower, as if weighed by beads. Somewhere a bird clicks twice like a door closing. You keep the last line of the song under your tongue till sleep dissolves at ridge, Wengate whistling, rock reeds home. When you finally drift, the root drifts with you, wrapping the camp in a soft shared memory you'll wear like a talisman when tomorrow rises and asks, as it always does, if you remember the way. You pull a coal out with a stick, breathe it awake, and the camp tilts toward dinner, the way sunflowers tilt toward light. Tubers get raked from ash with a hiss, like rain on leaves. A rib bone becomes a ladle, and a flat stone goes glossy with fat. You can feel how cooking edits the whole day, slicing off hours of chewing and giving them back to you as time for planning. Flirting, teaching, and that rolling sentinel sleep where at least one pair of ears keeps watch. Heat is your second stomach. You feed it roots and meat, and it pre-digests what would otherwise cost you jaw time and gut energy. Joke one skitters in like a chip of bark. Tonight's menu is smoky stew with notes of smoke. The chef accepts your compliments and your cough. Mainstream fact glows steady beneath the pot deep inside Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. Archaeologists found ash-burned bone and reddened sediments about 1 million years old, early evidence that fire wasn't just borrowed from wild burns, but managed in dark places for warmth and, yes, cooking. Later at Kesem Cave in Israel, roughly 400,000 to 200,000 years ago, repeated hearth use and cut-marked, heat-altered bones line up like a calendar you can taste. Even older lakeside sites, such as Gisher Benot Yaakov, where we already warmed our hands on charred plant remains, show scorched nuts and fish bones that make your tongue remember oil. Historians still argue whether habitual cooking began with Homo erectus or waited for later cousins, and whether those early fires were constant camp companions or seasonal luxuries. But the long arc bends one way. People learn to aim heat and never stop. You spear a tuber blow split and watch steam carry yesterday's bitterness into the night. Cooking lowers. Toxin loads break starches, softens fibers. The math is simple but profound. Softer food means shorter guts, lighter jaws, smaller teeth, and freed calories to spend elsewhere on brains that burn hot and social lives that stretch after dark. Your species chooses think and talk over chew forever, and the choice leaves fossils. Jawbones slim down, molars shrink, and skulls rebalance like tents with new poles. You take a slow bite and feel civilization murmur under your tongue. Quirky tidbit splashes into the pot you can boil before pottery by heating stones in the fire and dropping them into a water-filled hide bag or bark container. Hot rock soup complete with that comic clunk of stones trading places with bubbles. The trick pops up in far-flung traditions. It's the Stone Age's pressure cooker without the pressure gauge. Tonight, your friend does the honors cycling round smooth stones between coals and bag. The water murmurs, the fat rises, and the camp smells like a good decision aging well. You rend fat into marrow candles and drip a little over roasted seeds, because luxury is also survival-dense energy you can carry to leaner days. The elder slices thin strips for drying. Tomorrow, the sun will finish what the fire began. Smoke threads through everything preservative insect deterrent atmosphere. Joke 2 lifts the lid, peeks in, and nods sagely. The house specialty is campfire eau de parfum, top notes pine and ambition. You snag the eggshell canteen, the fire-to-go of drink, and splash a mouthful over a sizzling edge to tame it. The hiss writes a tiny poem about control. Mainstream physiology hums behind your ribs while you stir. Cooked starch means glucose sooner. Collagen unwinds into approachable gelatin. Parasites die with a satisfying lack of drama. Toothware patterns in ancient jaws read like archives of softer processed meals. Dental calculus. Yes, fossilized plaque has trapped microfossils of cooked starches and smoke signatures in mouths that never saw a toothbrush. Historians still argue whether cooking alone turbocharged brain growth or whether it joined endurance cooperation and tool planning in a choir. But you can hear the harmony in your evening, a pot gurgling a story, forming a plan sharpening to tomorrow's point. You try a favorite trick, bury a packet of river greens and fish in damp leaves beneath a shallow ash bed, then lay a warm stone on top, an earth oven in miniature. The packet steams until flavors shake hands like traders at a reed bed market. When you open it, steam as soft as a lullaby. The camp leans in. You pass out bites on bark slivers, and even the kid who doesn't like greens accepts seconds because butterfat has made friends with chlorophyll. Cooking is diplomacy between tongue and plant. It negotiates peace treaties. Your jaw alone could never write. Auntie drips resin-thick birch pitch into a shallow shell to keep it pliable for hafting later. And you love how the hearth multitasks. It's glue pot and soup pot kiln and lamp bug smudge and news desk. You heat treat a stubborn chert nodule near knot in the coals your rocks. That slap channel's pro tip and its fracture mood improves like a sulk warmed into a smile. The camp hums with cross-pollination, the same fire that tenderizes dinner tempers tomorrow's edges, the same smoke that preserves meat, preserves sanity by chasing midges away from eyelids. You remember your first uncooked day long ago, jaw aching, belly loud, patience thin, and you feel retroactive gratitude for whoever first banked an ember in fungus and carried it across miles. There's that ember coin again, traveling in a pocket of bark like a savings account that pays out in soup. You also think of the honey guide, the dessert hotline, and whistle softly. A faint answer clicks from the dark. Or maybe that's wishful thinking. But either way, a drop of saved honey later tonight turns tubers into nostalgia. Dinner also changes politics. A hearth makes a center. People orbit centers. With a fire comes a circle, with a circle comes talk, and with talk comes norms that outlast individual moods. The pot distributes calories like a fair-minded accountant first, to need, then to effort, then to luck. Insult the meat makes its cameo. Insult the stew follows when the salt is heavy and everyone laughs, because laughter is the lid that keeps pressure from exploding. Historians still argue whether the hearth encouraged pair-bonding grandparent investment or simply bigger evening networks. But in its light, you can see lineage obligation and promise take on faces you can trust. Joke 3 ladles itself gently. If you ran a cooking show, it would be called Preheat to Survive, and every episode would end with, Remember, friends chew less, chat more. Viewer mail from hyenas skyrockets. Comment section remains closed. As the pot empties, you scrape the last sticky film into a bowl and save it. Tomorrow, that fat will shine a bowstring, soften a sheath, or turn a bitter root agreeable. Waste is a modern word. Here, it's an impossibility. You slide stones from the hot rock bag with forked sticks, lay them in a ring to cool, and nod to the apprentice not to touch. Yes, the lesson about glowing rocks is never taught only once. A few of the best stones go back near the coals for a slow dry. Water trapped inside is a tiny bomb you'd rather not set off near ankles. Your mouth feels kindly full, your limbs warm, your mind clear. The night inherits your attention and reshapes it for the long watch. You bank the coals low, 2 sticks thick ash like a blanket, and the little sun settles obediently. The canteen's scratch marks our portable archive catch a last wink of orange. Tomorrow, you'll taste the same logic again. Heat where it helps, timing where it matters, patience everywhere. You lick a thumb, smudge a smear of soot across your nose by habit. Mat mowed on and lie back to listen to the fire's small conversation with air. Somewhere beyond the thorn, a hyena approves your seasoning with a laugh that fades into the dark. You grin and let your breath ease toward sleep steady as a simmer. The world will ask for energy in the morning. Tonight, you've banked enough to pay in calm. You step into the mouth of the cave the way you step into a story. Eyes adjusting breath, slowing ears widening until the dark has a texture you can touch. Someone breathes a coal awake behind you. Its glow rides your shoulder without leaking smoke on the panels you're about to visit. You smear a thumb of red paste across your forearm. Fat and ochre, the upgraded version of last week's ash and charcoal matte mode. It keeps bitey flies uninterested and the chill off your skin, and yes, it looks good. Function has a way of inventing fashion. The walls breathe back. You lift your hand and the world narrows to a palm-sized theater where heat, pigment, breath, and patience will make something that outlives you. You start with beads, the small talk of deep time. In a pouch, ride shells that never lived in this valley, traveling here on the necks of friends, proof that your voice can cross mountains even when your feet can't. You rub the edges to soften their drill scratches and string them in an order only your band fully reads a tiny flag that says, "This is us." Mainstream fact at places like Blombos Cave on the southern coast of Africa, people left engraved ochre and shell beads roughly 75,000 years ago, portable symbols worn on skin that turned bodies into walking billboards for clan story and obligation. Historians still argue whether such early engravings count as proto-writing or are simply pleasing doodles that became meaningful later. But when you knot your strand, your chest feels taller. The group can identify the group at a glance. Strangers can see who they're dealing with before they decide whether to share a fire. You move deeper toward a panel the elders treat like a lending library. The first mark you make is a negative, the absence of you made visible. You press your hand flat to the stone, purse your lips, and blow pigment in a soft spray so it blooms around your fingers like dawn around a hill. When you lift away, what remains looks like a quiet shout. I was here, but also we are here, but also follow this way. Maybe it's roll call, maybe rite of passage, maybe a signature on the group's contract with this valley. Historians still argue whether hand stencils were names, boundary markers, healing rites, or simply very good fun. But they do what you need tonight. They turn stone into memory that can be read without you present. Joke 1 winks in the perimeter. Yes, it's the original touch grass, but we prefer touch rock. Very grounding. 5 stars. The wall asks for animals next. You mix pigments the way last night you stirred stew tasting with your eyes. Red from iron-rich earth, black from charcoal and manganese, yellow where clay has a certain rusted optimism. You grind with a bone, thicken with fat spit or egg, and test a line on your thumb. The brush is a chewed twig or a feather or a fingertip. Your stencil is a reed blown like a flute. You sketch what the antelope does before it knows it will hawk's bunched eyes, slanting toward escape, and your lines remember things your mouth might forget under pressure. Mainstream fact whispers from the damp in caves from Europe to Indonesia, hand stencils and animals bloomed tens of thousands of years ago. Some Sulawesi panels trace back over 40 millennia, while El Castillo's red discs and hands push time even farther. Whether those hands were yours or cousins is less important than the continuity humans marking night with pictures that behave like instructions compatible with adrenaline. You hum as you draw to find the right spot. The echo answers a fat round note here, a thin skittering one there. You choose the place where sound thickens. It makes your arm hair rise. Quirky tidbit to tuck into your pouch with the bead kit in some cave's painted panels cluster, where echoes concentrate a possible hint that people mapped with the ear as much as with the eye, putting the bison where the cave already sounded like hooves. You clap softly. The cave claps back, and your line suddenly feels inevitable, as if the wall has been waiting to be told what it already knows. Your auntie arrives with a child on her hip and leaves her own hand beside yours, small or older the same. You realize how the trick scales. One palm means one person. A field of palms means lineage. No one reintroduces themselves. The stencils do it in chorus whenever a coal glows by. You press a tiny shell into a crack, not as offering, but as pin. So next seasons, you can find this yeet exact bend, the way you already find water by willow. Tilt and whistling rock by the sound it makes when the river starves. Mainstream fact. Steady as a breath. People have long ground ochre not only to paint walls, but to paint themselves. Bug deterrent, sunscreen, deodorant ritual. In Namibia, the Himba's Ojize paste tints hair and skin a living red. In Australia, ochre marks bodies and sites with meanings layered like coats of glaze. Historians still argue whether our Pleistocene kin used ochre chiefly as practical salve, as status signal, as medicine, as art, or all at once. But your skin says yes to each with the same warmth. Joke 2 strolls in wearing a bead necklace. Welcome to Plade Pleistocene edition. Exfoliate with sandstone, moisturize with marrow, accessorize with gossip. You add dots, rows, and ladders that look like counting. Though what you're counting shifts with the camp's needs, days until the reeds dust pollen onto air traps set along the game corridor, nights since the stranger with red quarry beads promised to return. Maybe it's calendar. Maybe it's scorekeeping for a songline's verse lengths. Your hand remembers the notched bone someone passed around by the fire, a piece whose later cousin will be called Ishango and argued into the moon or out of it depending on the scholar's tea. You scratch small tallies on a smooth stone you can carry a portable panel for when weather says no to cave time. The boundary between wall and tool blurs. A bead strand reads, a blade speaks, a cave teaches. Identity sticks to surfaces and then climbs inside. You crouch to paint a line where hunters should not step. This ledge crumbles if rain has licked the cliff. You could simply warn with words. You also want this to shout even when mouths are busy and thunder folds the sky. A stylized ripple becomes the place of falling. A spiral means go around. A crosshatch means move like water, slow, then fast. Is this writing? The word is tired and tidy. What you're doing is making causes visible. When the young ones see the spiral, their knees remember the story of the cousin who backstepped and met gravity. Their feet change plan before pride can argue. You leave a patch unpainted on purpose, a clean stage for the trance dancer whose breath will soon fog in this cool chamber. Sometimes the story needs to happen to the body to land in the head. Drumming, humming breath held until the edges sparkle. Your people know those doors. Historians still argue whether the strangest cave motifs, grids, claviforms, showers of dots, are entoptic forms seen in altered states, animal traps drawn as diagrams, or vocal cues for chant. You shrug, smiling because some arguments are thermostats. They keep a room warm, so questions feel welcome. The dancer steps into the blank and leaves nothing behind. That stone can keep, but the group keeps a little more of each other. On the way out, you pass a panel of old handprints with missing fingers. Frostbite arithmetic signal. For we used to live upriver. No one agrees, and the wall refuses to answer. Quirky tidbit from the other branch of your wandering library. Long after this, some people will carve figurines with bellies and breasts, exaggerated portable icons of abundance and continuity, while others will powder manganese not to paint, but to nudge coals hotter for easier fire starting a pigment that is also a spark. Multipurpose is your species' love language. Joke 3 beams, softly multi-tool review channel idea. This BlackRock eyeliner art supply fire starter. Hyena-proof rating pending. You step back into dusk, and your beads catch the last light, lifting the red of your skin paste into a warm shout. Strangers at the far spring will read that shout before you speak, and decide perhaps to come closer with palms open. Your own people read it too, and remember which strand means you're grieving quietly, which not means don't tease the stew tonight, which shell says I'm courting with intent. Tools made food, marks make belonging. The hand axe carved calories, the cave carves culture. Outside, the wind tastes of iron rain, thinking about itself. You note the taste and the panel you just painted that warns of crumble when the sky drinks deep. The camp will move a little sooner because your spiral waits underground, saying, go around in a language. Even panic understands. You touch the cave's lip as you leave the way you touch the fire ring, before sleeping a quiet thank you to stones that were cathedrals, long before anyone thought to stack them. The ember coin in its fungus bed rides home again in a basket with your pigments and your beads. Knock a tiny rhythm against your collarbone, a metronome for belonging. Back at the circle, someone admires your new necklace with the correct amount of teasing. Someone else notices the ochre sheen and asks for a swipe before their watch at the edge. The child from earlier presses his small hand to your dusty forearm, leaving a negative where his palm was. Your skin turned into a portable wall for a second. You laugh, then file the gesture away. Tomorrow, he'll get to blow pigment himself. Tonight, he wears the ghost of it back to bed, another page in a book that reads itself aloud every evening. When the fire shrinks to a purr, you lie down with grit in your hair and red under your nails. Your mind unspools the cave like a scroll, the echo-thick spot, the hands layered, like seasons, the spiral at the crumble path, the dot rows, whose meaning will change as needs do. Identity instruction, memory stitched into stone strung on skin, walked into rhythm. You sleep with the bead string across your chest, like a soft promise that tomorrow, if words fail, the marks won't. Morning finds you on a path that isn't a path, just a faint persuasion through scrub where feet have agreed for seasons to pass single file. Beads knock a soft hello against your collarbone. The pattern you strung in the cave is not jewelry today, so much as passport. Your pouch carries small favors wrapped in leaf and string. A coil of sinew, a smooth scraper from your Rocks That Slap collection. A cake of pitch, sweetened with a breath of smoke. The ember coin rides again in its tinder fungus cradle, because strangers respect a party that arrives with fire. Your ostrich eggshell canteen, our fire to go of water taps your hip. You're not shopping, you're weaving. The first sign that today will be useful is not human at all. A honey guide clacks twice and routes you toward a hollow log. You trill the dessert hotline follow and crack the hive with a polite minimum of drama. You leave wax and comb scraps on purpose. Your feathered broker takes its commission in calories, the way good deals always pay everyone who made them possible. Joke 1 tiptoes in somewhere in the bushes. A hyena grumbles about your shipping delays while leaving a 1-star review. Too much smoke, no express delivery. You accept the critique and pocket a strip of honey leather for later diplomacy. By midday, the valley shows its inventory. A dark band in the cliff obsidian vein. A low hill with creamy chert nodules peaking like knuckles. a stand of reeds that promise baskets, arrows, lullabies. You don't own these. You borrow them long enough to turn them into favors. Mainstream fact long before caravans and coin people moved materials. Astonishing distances, obsidian from islands like Melos shows up in mainland Greek sites, such as French the Cave. Mediterranean shells ride hundreds of kilometers inland. In Africa and elsewhere, geochemical fingerprints tie stone tools to quarries far beyond a single band's strolling range. Sometimes that means boats, sometimes just many friendly handshakes. Historians still argue whether most of those goods traveled by a few expert voyagers or by down-the-line exchange passed from neighbor to neighbor like gossip with weight. But whichever route you pick, the result is the same valleys talk to each other through stuff. At the far spring, you spot them two figures in silhouettes you recognize by posture more than profile. Their beads flash the ochre of a quarry upriver, the one whose smell rides storms. You don't approach fast, you approach readable. Hand open, knife sheathed, a small trill. Your polite visitor dialect, so any nervous dogs can file you under, probably fine. The script is old, but never stale. Greet, eat, trade names for places, daughter of the Windgate friend, to the Whistling Rock, then trade things. Your beads are not currency exactly, but identity that assures the exchange won't be a one-night stand. Obligations stamp themselves on smiles. You open the pouch like a good story, one reveal at a time. A scraper clean enough to show reflection. A little pitch loaf you cooked last night at the hearth while the stew burbled. Quirky tidbit in sandy countries, people mold resin into standardized cakes and carry them like portable glue bread. Their barter repair kit and kindling booster in one, and yes, they smell like a candy shop that took a wrong turn into a forest. You offer one cake, and a favor, you'll set a child's bone flute with a new plug if they'll show you the shallow path around the flooded bend. They nod the nod that means, we'll remember this when the sky tastes of iron. Favors are the original interest-bearing accounts. Among your far southern cousins, there's even a name that scholars will later write down, hexaro, for a system that sends gifts wandering so that friendships stretch across drought lines and bad luck borders. You do the same without the word, but with the wisdom. Give light, often give to those who can return help when luck makes your throat dry. The elder from their camp fingers your bead pattern left, right, left, like footfalls, and reads it correctly. You are the person who navigates by echo pockets in caves. Good. They need someone who can listen to stone. Joke two perches on your shoulder. You think of this network as LinkedIn Upper Pleistocene, complete with endorsements. Skills not getting lost. Making glue, telling stories that prevent crocodile dentistry. Still, it's not a job board. It's a weatherproofing system for human lives. When sickness comes, a gift can call help faster than a shout. When a hunt fails, a remembered loaf of resin can turn into marrow and tuber from a friend 2 days away. You feel the unsaid rules under your feet, the way you feel gravel through your soles. Gifts must be light, not burdensome. Status must sit down when laughter enters the circle. You insult the meat equivalent at trade time to trimming brag before it grows teeth. A stranger says their new drill point is so sharp it could shave a sleeping lion. You smile and answer, let's not. Everyone laughs, and the point returns to being a tool instead of a personality. The map grows as you talk. They tell you about a red ochre outcrop with a sweeter grind. You tell them about the bee tree that resets every 6 weeks. They warn of a reed bed where crocodiles practice the art of looking like logs. You warn of a ridge where the wind hates fire. Remember the taboo drawn in the cave. A handful of shells changes wrists. A child circles you with frank appraisal, then gifts you a small whistle carved like a bird. You give back a twist of sinew and a trick for drying it that produces fewer kinks. Each scrap is less about material than about promise. The exchange is a valve. It lets trust move. Mainstream social fact hums beneath the banter across many foraging worlds. Marriages often link distant bands, braiding families so information and aid cross landscapes that calories alone can't bridge. Mate exchange sounds clinical in a daylight scholar's mouth. In firelight, it looks like cousins in two valleys, knowing they can walk into each other's camps with the exact right level of teasing. Historians still argue whether such ties formed as deliberate strategy under climate stress, or as the default rhythm of small societies, where novelty is its own nutrient. Either way, tomorrow's rescuers are the strangers you joke with today. Later, as clouds fold the sun, you help them lift a cache stone at a landmark. Everyone trusts the flat table rock with a lichen beard. Below, in a cool slot, sleep a few prepared cores, a twist of cordage, and a wrapped packet of ochre. For lean days, the elder says, or travelers like you. Your fingers hover, then withdraw. You contribute a new scraper and a note in the only ink that lasts 3 pebbles set in a line that means added the camp's tiny accounting system. If hyenas ever discover abstract notation, you're finished. For now, the ledgers of stone remain beautifully hyena-proof. Joke 3 takes a bow as you trade recipes. 2 fistfuls of crushed seed, a thumb of honey. 1 joke told at medium heat, stir until egos soften. You share the honey. They share a seed cake that tastes like last week's sunshine. The tension that always lives at the edges of unfamiliarity leaks away like steam. Your knives stay sheathed because your mouths did the work first. On the walk home, wind lifts the edge of your hair and brings the smell of weather. You check the scratches on your canteen, the portable archive, and line 1 notch up with the first star to peek through. It is time to head for the safe camp near the Whistling Rock. You call the honey guide a "thanks it will not understand" and leave the rest of the comb on a high branch for later travelers who read your kindness without needing your name. The day leaves more than goods in your pouch. It leaves threads. If tomorrow a fire leaps wrong in the reed bed, you know who has spare water skins and who knows the trick of smothering with wet mats. If a child coughs hard, you know who carries the bitter bark tea that quiets nights. If the river sulks low, you know the hidden seep in the bend that prefers you to approach slowly singing. The map in your head now wears stickers from other people's worlds. The stickers are favors waiting to be redeemed or returned. On the last rise before camp, you look back. The valley isn't a backdrop anymore. It's a marketplace of trust. The cave where you left your hand is a branch office of memory. The trail is less a line than a braid steps, stories, scents, songs. Trade is just one word for it. You prefer distant friends. When the embers accept your breath and the pot starts talking again, you lift a seed cake and a new resin loaf into the circle. People grin the grin that says tomorrow will have reach long enough to touch help. And you will, because you spent today weaving that reach one small gift at a time until the landscape itself begins to feel like a relative who answers when called. You follow a seam of black that fingers through the grass warm under your soles, though dawn is still cool. Yesterday's flame kissed this place. Today it smells like tea and smoke. In front of you, the plain is a quilt here, charcoal lace there, neon green sprouts. Beyond that, a tawny square older than both. You aren't burning to destroy, you're editing. A fire stick, basically a traveling ember coin on a handle, rides your palm like a pen. You wait for the wind to nod. When it does, you lay a line low and slow, then walk with it, shepherding a flock of small flames that nibble dead stems but leave the bones of the land intact. The grass sighs, ticks hate you, and tomorrow's grazers are going to line up like it's brunch. Mainstream fact walks beside the flame like a calm auntie. Many Aboriginal Australian communities practiced what later writers nicknamed fire stick farming. Cool patchy burns at chosen times that keep fuel low. Promote fresh green, pick cokes, certain yams and lilies, and open easy walking. Ecologists counting plants and animals after such burns often find mosaics richer than either long unburned or scorched wide land. Historians still argue whether similar intensities of fine-tuned burning dotted Pleistocene Africa and Eurasia, or whether they blossomed much later in different places independently, but the principle plays the same chord, little often with attention. Joke 1 lifts its eyebrow. Yes, you're technically a pyromaniac, but like with boundaries and an excellent morning routine. You step across a line where old black becomes new green, and the change underfoot is audible crisps to tenderness in 2 strides. An antelope pauses at the edge, ears twitching at your polite fire. Fresh shoots already taste like a promise. You smile because tomorrow's hunt just scheduled itself. Fire isn't bait exactly, but it is kitchen prep for the meadow. You drizzle ash with your ostrich eggshell fire-to-go canteen, and the line sighs out clean as a candle snuffed. It's not the size of the burn you remind your apprentice, it's the timing and the wind. Same lesson as napping, don't fight the material. Invite it. Between patches, the land wears your paths like subtle rivers. Endless feet have threaded these lines, your strangers' animals who borrowed your roots because you borrowed theirs. Corridors grow where bodies agree. You pause at low stone piles in a shallow V half sunk and mossed. Your grandmother calls them the old hands drive lines that guide deer toward a bend where the wind and reeds make drama on your side, not theirs. Mainstream fact with its field hat on. Archaeologists map such drive systems in many places. Low stone rows for caribou in the Arctic, rock kites in Arabia for gazelles, cairn-studded corridors in mountain passes, human geometry on wild bodies' habits. Historians still argue whether every V you see was laid by your folks, or whether some are rockfall dressed in story over centuries. But the undeniable truth is that animals read landscape, and humans wrote edits in the margins. Quirky tidbit rolls in a wheel of smoke. Your resin torch doubles as an insect repellent if you pack it with the right smoldering punk that friendly tinder fungus again, and triple duties as a breadcrumb trail. Tiny black kisses on bark that point home like punctuation marks. In wet seasons, you swap the torch for ember packets and bark, and the path you draw is scent and story more than line. But either way, the landscape remembers you with marks that rain can't erase in a week. On the ridge you meet trees, like old partners' oaks that live, because you keep their competitors honest with gentle fire nut. Nut bearers, spaced as if planted by a tidy mind. Maybe they were one shell at a time. You prune with appetite, break dead twigs for the hearth, scatter old hulls that fertilize the soil with a glitter of calcium. A stand of berry canes that used to snag your calves now bows generous and clean, because last cold season you gave it a haircut with flame. The shrubs pay in sugar. You pay in restraint. Joke 2 pops a seed between your teeth. Welcome to Gardening Wild Edition. No fences, no HOA, just very opinionated pruning. The stream below wears a laced skirt of woven stakes, a fish weir you and cousins maintain after floods. When water is low, you guide it into little thought-out bottlenecks. When water is high, you let it sing through. In another part of the world, people stack stones at the low tide to make terraces that invite clams to breed little staircases of food that climb into the future. Hunter-gatherer sounds like casual browsing, but your calendar is busier than a market trader's. You plan by moon, by flower dust, by insect voice. The ground is your coworker. You've just learned its language well enough to schedule meetings. Mainstream soil memory hums when you kneel at a dark patch in otherwise stingy ground. You rub it and come away black-fingered char and bone, sifted into dirt again and again until it behaves like a bank account that pays interest in tubers. In the big forest far away, your cousins made such dark earths, call them anthropogenic soils, call them charcoal-rich gardens that still feed plants long after the original fires cooled. Historians still argue whether those black fertile patches were deliberate engineering or the gorgeous side effect of tidy, hearth-sweeping trash heap management and steady ash gifts. But either way, intention or emergent neatness, people changed the ground that later changed them. Down in the valley, you and 3 others walk the game corridor, not built so much as curated. Fallen trees are rolled off the path with jokes that make heavy things lighter. Thorny intruders are cut and piled where you want rabbits to den. Puddles are scooped a hair deeper to remember water longer in dry spells. Animals read your edits as hospitality. You read their hoofprints as RSVP, when you insult the meat, later teasing the good luck, so egos don't colonize it. You'll also praise the corridor, because the hunt is as much infrastructure as heroics. Joke 3 trails like a wisp from your torch. If you put this on your fictional channel, you'd title it Landscaping Before Lawns. And the comments closed because hyenas would be full of unsolicited advice about mulch. You smile and drag a fire line through a mat of tinder dry thatch, while the breeze yawns approval. Afternoon folds. The mosaic you made this morning has already sent up tiny green punctuation. A flock of guinea fowl tests the buffet. A monitor lizard does quality control. Your apprentice points to a bare oval and asks if you'll seed it. You shrug and tap your pouch. Seeds hide their grasses that respond well to your edits, a bulb you split last season and promised to test in the old pig scratch patch. You don't farm in neat rows. You befriend in handfuls. When you walk a trail tomorrow, you'll spit a few seeds into ant-broken soil. The little gardeners will drag them deeper, and the plant will find a home because allies made a welcome mat. Mainstream ethnography leans in as a reminder. In many places, people tend wild orchards spreading desired species by eating and tossing pits, by weeding competing saplings around good ones, by moving cuttings along roots. Over generations, a valley wears human taste like perfume more berries, where paths pass more nuts, where camps repeat fewer bitey shrubs, where ankles vote no. Historians still argue whether a given landscape patch was natural managed or gardened, and whether our fondness for tidy categories hides a truth. The land already knows with humans around. Ecosystems learn new habits. On your way back, you stop at the Whistling Rock. Its hollow note, a barometer, a gossip machine, a friend. You leave 3 ash marks, light, light, light to mean burned cool leave be a moon. The sort of note even strangers can read if they've walked enough. The honey guide clicks from somewhere, a dessert hotline you won't dial today because trade sweets sit already in your pouch from yesterday's diplomacy. You pat the eggshell canteen, align a notch with the fat early star, and let the path home reassemble under your feet. At camp, the elder looks up at the smell on your hair and nods. Good burns, good restraint. Someone holds up a tuber sprouting a tiny white tongue and asks if that means the ridge is ready. It does. Someone else wants to know if the deer pushed farther along the corridor. They did. You pass around a handful of black soil in your palm, the dark earth that teaches roots to be brave, and it's touched as reverently as a new blade from rocks that slap. Not because it's fancy, but because it means tomorrow will be gentler. When night folds over you, bank the coals with more careful ash than usual. The smoke hangs sweet, the stars approve. You realize lying down that you didn't take from the land today. You co-authored. You wrote little sentences in flame and footstep. The valley replied with sprouts and hoof marks. Tomorrow, someone will read your edits and add their own, and the text called home will keep revising itself toward livable. You drift off to the faintest crackle from the last patch, still chewing old grass, and, in your dream, a hyena respectfully submits a maintenance ticket. Please keep the brunch bar restocked. You'll consider it lightly at first light. You leave before the sun remembers its job walking, when the air still tastes like stone and dew. Your beads knock a small metronome against your collarbone. The eggshell canteen. The fire to go of water taps your hip like a friendly reminder to sip before you're thirsty. You aren't following a trail so much as composing one ridgelines to keep the sky-wide spurs to avoid gullies that trap heat along shoulder that delivers you to the Whistling Rock without the cliff that taught your cousin why we drew a spiral in the cave. The world looks blank to anyone waiting for painted signs. To you, it is over-annotated. You start with wind. Last night's smoke leaned north. This morning, your cheek reports a cooler breath from the opposite quarter. Wind carries stories. It brings the minty hint of crushed reed from a path only hip height. Children passed there, plus the iron-sour premonition that rain is nearby, the aftertaste of petrichor arriving before the sky decides to drip. Joke 1 strolls at your elbow. Sure, moss grows on the north side of trees. Except when it doesn't. Your actual compass smells like wet dirt and old leaves, and is significantly more reliable than moss's personal preferences. A quick sun trick sets your baseline. You press a stick in sand, mark the shadow's tip with a pebble. Wait, mark again. Bisect the arc, and you have a tidy east-west line as portable as any stone flake from your Rocks That Slap kit. The sun is not a clock you wear. It's a wheel you stand inside. By late morning, the arc tells you where not to be inside a heat bowl, where air stagnates and antelope melt. So you contour the cool side of the slope, listening to larks writing weather updates that cost you 0 shells. Mainstream fact leans in with a steady voice. Your Farsi cousins long after the hand axe, but fueled by the same patient attention, made stick charts in the Marshall Islands' delicate lattices of palm ribs that record how swells bend around islands. They sail by reading the sea's texture with elbows, and ribs navigating at night by star paths memorized as songs. Historians still argue whether people in deep prehistory used true star compasses for long migrations or preferred rivers' coasts and repeating landforms. But the habit of binding direction to rhythm, step, breath, verse feels as old as firelight. You do your land version now, ridge to ridge, song to song, breath to breath. When the sky finally takes a blue breath, you lift your eyes to the day's first contrails vultures circling thermals. Thermals mean rising warm air. Rising warm air means the valley floor is cooking. Cooking valley means you stick to the wind-washed collar of the ridge. Somebody once told you to trust the high lines, and you do, because a high line is a choir rail. It keeps your feet and your thoughts from tumbling into every invitation gravity whispers. You tune your ears. Rivers talk in dialects. A low, steady roar is deep water across even stones. A chatter means shallow riffles. A periodic thunk says a log is playing pinball in a bend you should not wade. Your old friend, the whistling rock, throws a thin note into air drier than yesterday, higher than last week. That tells you the gap behind it is wind-hollowed and hungry. You'll skirt, not squeeze. Sound keeps you honest when the horizon is stingy. At noon, you take shade and read the sky's tiny handwriting. Clouds thin to mares' tails high, ice scribbles that promise a front tomorrow, and swifts stitch low loops, harvesting insects pushed down by pressure. You file it with the eggshell's notches and the cave's dot rows. Your body is a library card, and everything stamps it. Joke 2 drifts in your internal GPS says recalculating, but instead of bossy, Beeps It offers a gentle anti-hum and a cup of bitterness-taming ash tea. Night will be your favorite map. You've practiced the constellations the way you practiced napping slow, repetitive, shamelessly proud when the edge holds. In the north, if you ever walk that far, a single bright star sits smug near the sky's axle. In the south, the cross tilts, and the long axis points roughly toward the pole, an arrow. You can extend with an invisible stick. Rising points matter more than shapes, where this star lifts its chin in spring, where that one kisses the horizon when roots are sweet. Mainstream fact slips another coal under your palm. Stone circles from Gosek to Nabta Playa, and alignments at places like Stonehenge tie human gatherings to solstice sunrises and sunsets. Historians still argue whether every alignment is intention or coincidence or retrofit. But the urge to weld sky to schedule is so handy, it feels inevitable. You hum a star path now, not because you're sailing, but because the song keeps your feet smart and your mood lighter than the pack. Closer in the land offers cheat sheets. In northern Australia, magnetic termite mounds stand like thin tombstones, their long faces aligned roughly north-south, so colonies can thermoregulate sun on the big face at morning and evening shade at noon. Quirky tidbit filed under accidentally helpful neighbors. If you happen to walk that country, You can check direction by mounds that don't care about your itinerary, only their own comfort. Here on this ridge, your local equivalents are different flag trees. Flag harder on the prevailing wind side. South-facing pockets keep dew longer. A certain lichen blushes greenest where storm spray reaches when the river performs its yearly flex. You read all of it, but never alone. Any one sign can lie. 10 together tell the truth. Your nose is a cartographer with opinions. The watery sweet of crushed willow points to a seep that plants were too polite to shout about. The cold stone smell says a cave mouth nearby, probably a little sunset-facing pocket, perfect for a nap or a storm wait. The faint ammoniac funk of a predator den reroutes you 40 paces right. You don't need that interview today. Your tongue does a tiny tasting aeronaut plant and reports dust from a far trampled patch. Other feet are ahead of you, not close, but worth thinking about. You leave marks lightly. A char kiss on a bark, not a scar, just a signature that rain will rinse in a moon, says you passed here and the path ahead is not embarrassing. 3 pebbles in a row below a cairn mean added same as the cache at the lichen-bearded table rock. A fan of crossed grasses points your own retread toward a safe descent route where the crumble ledge sulks. You borrow what animals already understand hospitality that doesn't trip anyone. At dusk, the star school opens. A slow turning dome invites your shoulders to match its pace. The first appearance of a familiar triad there by the notch in the ridge where you once cut your ankle sets your course. You whisper to yourself the seed words you hung on each reed whistle stone bowl salt bowl. They're not the scientists' names. They're the names that fit your mouth and remember water, wind, and food. Historians still argue whether Paleolithic people formalized star lore with anything like a universal zodiac or kept it hyper-local, attached to specific ridges and rivers. You shrug at the stars because both feel true depending on who is walking and where the soup is. You think about fringe rumors passed around, fires you've shared with far travelers. Some say people can sense the Earth's magnetic field, faintly brains twitching when researchers rotate invisible lines in a dark room. You don't build journeys out of rumors, but you keep a pocket for marvels. Because curiosity, like glue, sticks better if it stays warm. Whether or not your head carries a compass, your feet clearly do, and your jokes keep it company. Joke 3 is a yawn with a smile. If hyenas wrote a travel blog, they'd complain your wayfinding lacks scenic detours involving unattended stew pots. Home happens before you see it. You hear the roll of a log, the murmur hiccup rhythm of your camp's particular laugh, the honey guide's off-duty chatter, a baby coughing 2 syllables you recognize. The first ember wink through brush is not surprise, it's punctuation. You step into the ring. Someone looks up, reads the dust pattern on your shins and the ash thumbprint on your cheek, and knows where you've been without a committee meeting. You report the water logic at the south bend, the cross's tilt. If the clouds obey the wind's morning left hand, that might flip if the mare's tails mean what they usually mean. The elder nods and shifts tomorrow's plan by a finger width. That's all it takes to turn lost into on time. As the coals breathe, you feel the map unspool from your muscles. No paper, no pins, just you, the sky, the ground, the gossip, the pongs, the smell of rain. You tasted before the rain. You're the library again, the one that reads itself every night. The real power people keep calling caveman isn't that you never get lost. It's that when the world moves under your feet, you move with it so gently that by the time the stars come out, the way home is already standing beside you, hand raised, ready to be stenciled on the cave wall for whoever needs it next. The cough begins like a small drum in the child's chest, then edits itself quieter when she sees everyone looking. You kneel so your eyes are level with hers and make a game of counting breaths against your beads. Calm is medicine. The elder touches your arm with a twig of bitter bark, the one you know on the tongue by its aspirin echo, and gestures toward the pot where water is already warming. Your ostrich eggshell canteen. The fire to go of water empties with a soft glug, That sounds exactly like relief, in future tense. You build a little clinic out of ordinary things. Willow bark curls in the simmering water, a few crushed leaves riding the steam, and the smell is clean green decisive. Mainstream fact long before pharmacy aisles. People learned that willow holds salicylates, the ancestors of aspirin, and brewed it for fever and pain. Dental calculus from some Neanderthals even preserves poplar. Another salicylate and traces of penicillium mold, a hint at self-medication with both painkillers and accidental antibiotics. Historians still argue whether those plant traces prove deliberate dosing or happy coincidence from chewing whatever was handy. But the tea tastes the way solutions taste, slightly awful and very convincing. Joke 1 leans in with a whisper. Doctor recommends 2 sips and a nap. Side effects include making your face like this. You demonstrate a heroic pucker. The patient laughs, which is half the point. The healer with the slow hands works on a sprained ankle nearby. You've watched the ritual so often that your fingers do the choreography without asking press to test pull to a line wrap to hold. 2 sticks become a splint pitch, warmed at the fire becomes a tacky friend, and a binding of softened sinew finishes the job. You remember your rocks that slap hafting lesson stone to shaft with pitch and fiber, and realize bone setting is the same physics, but with higher stakes and gentler jokes. Mainstream fact glows steady here too. Skeletal remains from deep prehistory often show healed fractures, evidence that injured people lived long enough for bone to knit, which implies care food and protection from the sort of oops that ends a life when you're alone. Historians still argue whether such care was universal or lucky pockets of kindness, but your camp treats it like a given because you'll be the one needing help next season, and fairness likes to travel. You mix a paste of honey and crushed yarrow for a little cut, earned by someone who is certain the fish weir respected bare feet. Honey is a sweet antiseptic rude to bacteria, generous to skin. Yarrow's bitter bite talks to blood, asking it to slow and organize. Quirky tidbit from the traveling shelf in your head. Spider silk makes a good bandage fine, sticky, surprisingly clean. If you collect it right, it lays like gauze and tells a wound to behave. You dab the patient. Hisses the camp heckles gently. Insult the cut and the sting becomes a shared joke instead of a private panic. Sometimes medicine is theater on purpose. The healer powders ochre across a fevered forehead in a pattern the child recognizes as bravery lines. The pigment warms the skin, tells insects to mind their own business, and equally crucial, tells the nervous system a story it wants to hear. You are seen, you are tended, you are safe. Placebo is not a dirty word in your camp. It's one of your sharpest tools, a story with measurable side effects. Your hand hovers above the child's chest, and you count with her in 2-3 out 2-3. Her breath finds the metronome we've used for persistence hunts, star paths, and stew simmering. Everything sinks, and the cough decides to be smaller today. A grandmother with a healer's memory lays out a little pharmacy on a skin mat willow. Yes, pine resin to seal, mint to cool, char to dry a weepy patch, ash to tame bitterness in roots and in a pinch stomachs. She taps a fungus tucked in a bark pouch, the same tender cousin that carries our ember coin. Only this one birch polypore is for insides as well as fires, bitter tea for worms, gentle scold for guts. You think of the mountain traveler. We've gossiped about a man found long after his nap in the ice tattoos, marching along sore lines, a pouch that held this very fungus, and you feel the timeline squeeze old tricks still crisp. Historians still argue whether those tattoos mapped pain points, ritual routes, or both, and whether the fungus was standard kit or his private superstition. You shrug toward the coals. Either way, your people keep both fungus and superstition close. A toothache shuffles into camp with a grown man trying to act smaller than the pain. He sits braced for doom. You counter with ceremony. A sliver of twig becomes a toothpick, and a measure of respect for inflamed gums. Smoke does a small dance around his head. Flies mind your mat mode, and the warmth unknots a clenched jaw. There are lines in ancient teeth microscopic grooves that tell you toothpicks are older than shame, and you love the continuity hygiene as heritage. You give him a rinse of salty water, then a dab of chewed willow, and because you're not barbarians, you distract him with joke too. Bite the stick only a little. We need it for future drama. The stick survives. So does his dignity. When bodies need more than tease and tact, the camp sings. You've seen the circle build heat from inside, breath quickening, to drum feet, pounding the dust until the whole ground seems to thrum. Someone shakes a rattle of seed pods. Someone hums the low note that feels like earth speaking. The healer's breath changes, and the hair on your arms notices, then joins. Rhythms climb a ladder you can't see, but can climb anyway. This is trance, and it is not random. It's a doorway the group built from repetition and trust, hyperventilation, and sweat, yes, but also refuge and permission. Mainstream fact in Kalahari. Healing dances, singers and dancers, raise an inner heat. Some call moving sufferers' pain through touch and song. Rock art scholars read echoes of such practice in older paintings elsewhere. Historians still argue whether Paleolithic cave signs spring mainly from trance visions, or if that's one thread among hunting diagrams, calendars, and social theater. But your body recognizes the shared effect. Tonight the circle edits fear until it fits inside a human chest again. You think of skulls with round-heeled windows, trepanations that left scars smoother than the drama that made them. People bored through bone, and some lived long enough for new bone to frame the whole. Medical intervention. Release of pressure. A ritual opening for illness to leave. Historians still argue motive, but survival lines on bones say the patient didn't die on the mat. Somebody fed and guarded them through weeks when a sneeze could have been a disaster. Your camp doesn't drill heads. Your camp does, however, press cool clay to hot temples and hum the low note until the muscles unclench on their own. The point is the same escort a person back to themselves. The child's cough returns smaller, then smaller again. A dog deciding whether to lie down, and finally choosing yes. You edge the willow pot aside and put on a pretend chef's voice. Tonight's tasting menu: bitter tea, mint steam, and honey on a spoon. The last item lands with disproportionate applause because you are not above bribing the immune system. Honey slides down like a golden password. The child licks the spoon as solemnly as any priest at any altar. One more patient finds you, the runner from the persistence hunt, with knees that wrote you a stern letter. You answer with a paste of fat and ash. Call it the first sports balm rubbed along tendons, a stretch taught by an auntie who knew both body and rhythm, and a small lecture on not racing the sun just because it's looking smug. He promises to behave. You and everyone else smile into your bowls. When the clinic winds down, you tidy the mat the way you tidied the napping floor. No stray thorns for bare feet, no sticky pitch where toddlers wander. You wedge the bitter barks near, not in the coals, so oils will keep, but not cook away. The eggshell canteen gets a rinse and a refill. You scratch a tiny notch to mark the night of willow and cough. Your portable archive grows by stories and scratches both. Joke 3 wanders through camp like a soft dog somewhere. A hyena runs an unlicensed practice. Dr. Laugh's remedies guaranteed to cure hunger by making everyone else drop their food. You keep your clinic's comment section closed. Before sleep, the healer puts a cool palm on your forehead and hums a cadence that folds your day into something bearable. You feel the circle behind it splints and tease songs and soot spider silk and honey fungus and faith. The real power of your people has never been in vulnerability. It's repair. You don't worship toughness. You practice return. And as the fire banks to a quiet heart and the cave's painted spiral waits for tomorrow's cautious feet, and the whistling rock breathes its dry eye note, into the night you let repair become your map. Your breath lengthens on purpose. Someone else will wake if the child coughs. You are held in a net. You help weave, and every knot is a hand that learned a recipe, a rhythm, a way back. Morning drips into camp like warm milk, and you notice the choreography begin before anyone names it. A baby yawns and turns his whole face into a sunrise. 3 hands appear, mother, grandmother, auntie, each doing a different job without bumping the others. One draws a finger down the bridge of his nose to switch the fuss off like a lamp. One swings a corded sling to the exact rhythm that makes hiccups remember they are optional. One hums a line that the camp has been singing since before anyone's knees stopped being round. You don't see childcare. You see culture under construction. You're drafted happily. Your task is water, eggshell, canteen, our fire-to-go of drink warmed a little so it won't surprise a new stomach. The grandmother rubs a thumb of fat and ash on a tender patch. Your first responder balm from the runner's knees and tells you the secret babies like to be worn like ideas, close, steady, portable. A soft skin wrap crosses the mother's back. The child becomes an extra heartbeat under her breastbone. Joke 1 peeks out of the wrap. Your unpaid internship title is Chief Cooing Officer Benefits. Include shoulder bursts of milk smell and an arm that goes pleasantly numb. Mainstream fact, sits down in the shade with a basket of sliced roots. Humans are cooperative breeders. We raise infants not just with parents, but with alloparents, grandmothers, aunties, older siblings, friends. Sometimes even the traveler with good jokes and clean hands, that's you. Among the Hadza and the Aka researchers timed who holds babies. Fathers and grandmothers do it often, and Aka dads in particular are famous for constant contact, skin to skin, day to day. Meanwhile, Kristen Hawkes and colleagues have argued the grandmother hypothesis that grandmothers foraging for dependable foods, like tubers, boosts child survival and frees mothers to wean early and have shorter gaps between births. Historians still argue whether grandmothering alone explains our unusual longevity, or whether it teams up with brainy embodied capital cooperative hunting and the social safety net we've been braiding across these nights. Your eyes vote for team up. The grandmother's hands make another convincing case. You think about the helplessness of human babies, the extra-long apprenticeship that trades precocious walking for precocious learning. A foal stands by lunchtime. Your babies specialize in downloading the camp, one expression at a time. The obstetric dilemma people like to say, big-brained infants born earlier because pelvises also have to run and birth. Then another camp pipes up with the EGG idea energetics of gestation and growth, arguing that pregnancy ends when the mother's metabolism hits a ceiling. Historians still argue whether pelvis shape endurance running and metabolic limits did a 3-way compromise or a gentler handoff. But here today, the debate wears a contented burp and tiny fists. Grandmothers are the camp's quiet logistics officers. The elder who led Hexaro-style gift routes yesterday now counts spoons, today calories and coughs out. Who needs an extra strip of dried fish slipped under a leaf so her milk keeps shining? She roasts a tuber longer than usual, so the starch remembers how to be sugar, then mashes it with a knuckle until it is almost singing. Pre-mastication, pre-chewing looks scandalous to someone who has never run out of blenders, but your people have always turned their jaw work into baby work. The paste goes in, the fuss goes down, and an entire afternoon of potential crying doesn't happen. The camp sighs, thanks in a dozen small ways, a joke lands better, a knot ties faster. The watch on the edge looks less like a chore, and more like the group breathing. Quirky tidbits aimed as moss diapers are a technology, and sphagnum moss is an engineer's dream absorbent. Mildly antiseptic, and everywhere you want it to be if you know where wet shade hides. Your people and many others in other climates stuff satchels with it, change it often, and keep skin from learning the alphabet of rashes. You carry an armful back like treasure because it is. Joke 2 grins over the bundle. Welcome to Rocks That Slaps sister show Moss That Bosses. Comment section still closed. Hyenas can't resist potty humor. The babies are social projects, not private hobbies. A teen with flaking ochre on his forearms, still proud of yesterday's cave panel practices. The sway and scan, a hip swing that pacifies the infant while his eyes patrol the thorn edge. A widower who carries his sorrow low in his shoulders gets the laughing one. Laughter is a good solvent for knots. An auntie who can knot basket starts and braid stories at the same time takes the one who demands motion. The rhythm of her hands convinces tiny bones the world has a plan. The mother catches a nap 10 minutes of luxury, and the grandmother guards it with a spear of looks sharper than any blade in your Rocks That Slap pouch. Mainstream biology hums beneath the lullabies. Oxytocin warms the circuits that make touch feel like the correct answer. Milk lets down more easily when the circle hums. Father's hormones even tilt with contact testosterone, easing down responsiveness, easing up because bodies are practical and know when to trade posturing for rocking. Human infants' cries are tuned to recruit a village, not just a pair. You can hear that cleverness at night when sentinel sleep leaves at least one person awake and ready to tuck a fallen blanket or bounce a midnight fuss. Sometimes help comes from the past. The grandmother's wrists carry scar lines you've traced under other moons. Old work healed fractures. Proof that people fed and fanned her once upon a time until bone remembered to be bone. That memory returns interest today as steady hands and a measured tone that lowers a room's blood pressure without anyone naming it. She is the camp's cache stone made flesh. You lift it, and there is stored food, stored skill, stored courage. The day burns smoother for her presence. You catch a lesson in cross-nursing without announcement. The mother with a low fever sidles to a sister who's flush with milk. Baby latches. The group votes yes with the same naturalness as sharing stew. A visitor from the Red Quarry River, yesterday's bead friend, watches for the correct amount of time, then offers a song from her valley that has the same bones as yours. Different words, same sway. Trade isn't just resin and shells. It's lullabies that still work when weather changes language. On the edge of camp, you practice the oldest daycare walking. A baby rides your hip and practices the grip that will later hold a digging stick. A mate's hand, a friend's wrist on a river crossing. You point out the whistling rock so his eyes can file northish under sound. I like the shallow cave so his ears can remember echo equals shelter, the spiral on your palm. That means go around, not through. He watches your mouth for the signs that mean hot, sharp stay. Words glue to faces before they glue to things. You can feel the grammar knitting. Joke 3 soft steps into the shade. You pitch your influencer idea to the aunties, prehistoric parenting hacks from moss nappies to ember coins, and they hand you a baby and tell you to prove it. You do badly at first, and then less badly, and then in a way that makes a small sleeping snore land on your collarbone as a promotion. The afternoon produces a problem disguised as practice. 2 toddlers orbit the hearth too closely. The same coals that cook and cure glue also teach boundaries. You narrate the danger without drama, then draw a ring of ash, visible rule. A story follows about the wind spirit that naps in certain places and hates hot breath. Remember the taboo you painted in the cave. Their feet remember the story with admirable speed. This is how you install software in tiny experimental brains with games lines and jokes that carry the same policy as a scowl but leave fewer scars. A question floats from the shade like a sweet smoke. Why do grandmothers live so long, if not to be grandmothers? The grandmother hypothesis hums again, and you add a personal footnote because they are bridges. They link last season's drought to this one's plan, last decade's mistake, to tonight's gentle prevention. Historians still argue whether longevity rode into town on Tuber's teamwork or a bargain between many small factors. You meanwhile watch a grandmother retie a sling one-handed while correcting a myth's 3rd line so it lands right and keeps children out of crocodile mouths. Your vote again is for team up. By evening, the nursery has braided itself into the rest of camp. Someone returns from persistence hunting and hands a strip of fat to a nursing mother before he drinks. The gesture says, "Your work fed us. Let this feed you." Someone else passes you a seed cake from yesterday's trade. You break it into coins and slip one into a grandmother's palm with mock ceremony, the insult, the meat version for desserts. Laughter files the edges off pride. Babies sleep easier when pride isn't prowling. You bank the coals a little higher tonight. Heat holds the circle's scent, smoke, milk, moss, mint, and the babies sigh as if the world has tucked them. Across the ring, a small hand rises and tries an echo of the cave stencil, palm up, fingers spread. I am here. Tomorrow that hand will press against stone and leave a quiet shout beside yours. Tonight it presses against your chest, and your own heart answers with a rhythm older than language in 2-3 out 2-3. The day ends as it began, not with one mother, but with all hands, your species' real superpower still humming in the dark, like an ember coin that refuses to go out. Dusk puts a velvet thumb on the camp and presses. You answer with rhythm. First, it's just footfalls, the hush thump of boyas on dust. Then hands find thighs, sticks find logs. A rib bone becomes a drum if you ask politely. Breath turns into metronome in 2-3 out 2-3. You aren't making noise, you're editing nerves. The same patience that kept a fire at simmer and a hunt at trot now learns a new trick sync. A dozen pulses, one tempo. The baby that hiccuped through the afternoon settles. The sentry at the edge keeps watch without feeling alone. Your own shoulders lose that last fingertip of tension you didn't know you'd saved. You bring out a length of pale bone you've been courting hollow light with an attitude. A razored flake from rocks that slap kisses a notch. A coal awl opens a finger hole. Birch pitch gums a tiny crack and smells like forest candy. Vulture wing most likely. You like the poetry of sky bones learning to sing again. You wet the edge of your pebble, yes, the mouth calm trick, and smooth the lip. Then you raise it. Inhale through your nose and send a thin, steady breath into old calcium. The note blooms like heat under a lid clear high, surprising even to you. Joke 1 struts into the circle with feathers on your band's name is the Ember Coins. And the hyenas will complain later that your encore was too uplifting, not enough bones. Mainstream fact rides that first note in caves along the Danube, Hohlfels Geisenklusterli people left flutes carved from bird bone and mammoth ivory more than 40,000 years ago, finger holes placed with the kind of care you recognize from good napping. Music isn't new to you, it's old as your long patience. At Marsoulas in France, a great seashell later sang again in a lab its makers had trimmed it, bored a mouth, and coaxed several clean notes from a spiral meant by the ocean for a different choir. Historians still argue whether an even older bone from Divja baby is a Neanderthal flute or a cave bear femur bitten by a hyena and misread by hopeful cousins. Either way, the desire to tune breath into signal is older than anyone in tonight's circle. You lower the flute. The camp answers with claps on 2 and 4 because humans can't resist a backbeat, even when they don't have the math for it. You watch how the rhythm edits labor. The fire tender stirs in time. The resin warmer scrapes a pitch cake at the exact downbeat. The splinted ankle from last night finds a walk step that hurts less when it rides the drum. You can measure the change with smiles if you like. Work becomes choreography. Pain becomes a part that knows its cue. In some far-off rooms, people with wires on their heads will later chart the way brains love to entrain to external pulses. Tonight, you chart it with soup not burning and tempers not fraying. You tilt the flute toward the whistling rock. The cave taught you sound lives in places. Tonight, the ridge proves it. A low hollow answers your note, warms it, rounds it. You shift your feet the width of a bead. The echo fattens. You mark the spot with a tiny char kiss. Rain will erase it in a moon and keep playing. Children circle you with reed shakers that used to be fish traps. A teen swishes a string with a bone tag that purrs in the air like a lazy wasp. And suddenly, the perimeter sounds busy enough that even the hyena hesitates. Rhythm can pretend to be crowd. Rhythm can bluff. Quirky tidbit slides into the circle like a spiral of salt on stew somewhere far toward the ocean. People make bull roarers, flat ovals on a cord that sing and thrum when spun, throwing voice farther than a shout ever could. Elsewhere and later, a conch carries announcements down a valley like a horn shaped by tide. The exact tools vary. The job description doesn't. You don't have a bull roarer tonight, but a world sling hums a respectable warning, and if you hum under it, the two notes beat like a heart learning harmony. Joke two bows from the cheap seats. Your channel adds a new series, Rocks That Slap Unplugged. Comment section still closed. Hyenas keep requesting free beef. Someone starts a courting rhythm on a shoulder drum, the kind that sneaks under conversation and lifts eyebrows without permission. Two youths pretend not to hear it. Everyone else hears it on their behalf. A grandmother adds an offbeat clap that says steady now, and the rhythm obeys like a horse that loves its rider. You think of persistence hunting's trot walk trot and realize you're doing the same thing, to attention bringing it just to the edge of panting, and then easing it back to talk. The elder's voice slides across the downbeat with a quick warning about the crumble ledge. You can feel how much better that rule sticks when it rides a groove. Mainstream physiological whisper group singing can tug breathing heart rate. Even little blood pressure wiggles into rough agreement. Oxytocin tilts, cortisol relents. People report lighter. Historians still argue whether music evolved as sexy display, social glue, mother-infant co-regulation, or the auditory cousin of tool rhythm hammerstone as metronome. But tonight, the answer wears stew steam and the hush that falls when a child stops coughing to listen. You tilt the flute toward her. No serenade, just acknowledgement, and her shoulders drop a thumb's width, which is a dose you can measure without a scale. You pass the bone to your apprentice. They stumble the first note. Blush, try again. The camp plays insult the rhythm, the cousin of insult, the meat-keeping ego's tidy. Nice imitation of a distressed ostrich, and then immediately kindly claps the tempo slower so the apprentice can land. Skill grows best where pride doesn't trip it. You feel the lesson settle the way coals do when you bank them right. A purr, not a roar. The dance shifts to work that needs doing anyway. Stomping becomes threshing. A row of hips becomes a line pulling a log. A call and response becomes inventory pitch chord shell stone. The joke you were saving stops being a joke and becomes a safety device. Hot rock coming through sung on a high note that parts the crowd faster than any scowl. Your species' favorite magic trick appears again, fun that pays rent. The baby on your hip slumps deeper, drooling on your ochre matte mode stripe. You don't mind. The stripe looks better with a glossy accent. You take the long drum, a skin stretched over a hollow log that remembers rain, and lay down a pattern you learned from someone who learned it from a cousin who learned it from a traveler with a shell bracelet you liked. Trade wasn't only resin and scrapers. It was loops and breaks, the way a valley ties its heartbeat to another's. You thread in the Honey Guide Trill Dessert Hotline, Eternal Classic, and the camp answers with the whistle you've all agreed, says friend approaching. Music rehearses emergencies when no one is afraid, so that later, when throats are tight, the right sounds still arrive. The fire warms the flute's pitch a hair. You adjust your fingers without naming it. The same physics that softened roots and tempered flint now tempers tone. You love how tools cross-train. The bow you'll string tomorrow to scrape a hide has the same curve as the dancer's spine. The flaker's bone becomes the flute's bone. The glue pot bubbles time for both. You stop worrying about categories. You never needed them anyway. Night blooms holy. The sentry sways to the quiet beat, but keeps her eyes on the thorn. The elder's hands tap their knees, and they watch all of you, not to judge but to memorize which rhythm calmed, which fear, which song made, which joke lands safely. Tomorrow they'll deploy the right one the way you deploy a sharp flake for the correct cut. The cave remembers with pigment. The body remembers with cadence. You finish with a low note that settles in the belly the way a good stew does. The camp lets the last overtones fade like fish ripples. Joke 3 soft as a yawn. If you record an album, it will be titled Songs to Not Be Eaten. by track list, including "Don't follow the hyena spiral," "Means go around and insult the meat," "Gently," limited release, One Valley unlimited replays. Before sleep, you tuck the flute near, "Not in the coals," "Warm is kind," "Scorch is cruel." A smear of pitch at the mouth hardens just right. Sinew sits happy. In the rolling watch, your blessed sentinel sleep, you hear a quiet hum from the person on edge and answer without waking with a foot tap that says with you. The coals breathe, the stars tilt. Tomorrow will ask for endurance again, and you will offer it. Tonight, you offer sync, and the camp synchronized feels heavier and safer in the ways that matter, and lighter in the ways that make rest possible. Rhythm, breath, bone, your oldest instruments, and the real power people keep, calling Caveman, is simply this: you make together easier than apart, until even silence keeps the beat. Dawn tastes like metal. The wind has teeth again, and far off the mountains wear new white, as if someone pulled a clean pelt over their shoulders during the night. You tighten the wrap at your chest, adjust the sling so the baby rides higher, and feel camp shift into its winter brain bundles. Smaller fires banked, deeper jokes, a fraction louder. The real power you keep discovering the ember coin in fungus, the fire to go eggshell. The insult, the meat, humility has to prove itself now. When the world narrows and distances stretch, you don't fight the cold, you befriend it. You aim it. You use it to teach your steps the old long rhythms again. Mainstream fact speaks through the frost. The world has leaned hard into ice, like this many times glaciers, growing and shrugging back in long breaths. Glacial, interglacial, on and on. During the last big lean, what later mouths call the last glacial maximum, seas fell and land rose where you never saw land before. Coasts strode out to meet the tide, and bridges of earth appeared where water used to gossip. A wide shoulder of ground, Beringia knits Asia to the far new lands, and people will walk that shoulder with patience you recognize. Historians still argue whether that crossing into the Americas happened first by foot over that grass-cold plain, or early along a kelp highway by canoes hugging coasts, or both braided together. But the lesson underneath the debate is familiar. You read the world's edits, and then you write back with feet. You walk when wind is behind your ear, and stop when snow speaks in that soft, jealous voice that eats footprints. Your rocks that slap are tucked deep under furs. Your pitch cakes sit warm in an inner pouch. Your beads flash from under a hood only when the sun looks kindly, which isn't often. You discover that silence has dialects. Snow hush, river ice, murmur the dry rustle of grass that somehow survived last week's bite. Joke one puffs white in the cold. You declare today's vibe Matty mode plus 5 layers. And the camp agrees, adding and no hyena reviews. Please, they moved south for content. You aren't alone out here, and not just because your circle walks in a looser ring. Each person a warm comma in a sentence that points toward the unrolled plain. Neighbors walk two old cousins with wide hands and strong foreheads. People your grandmothers know by scent and story, even if you sometimes swap side-eye before you share fire. Mainstream fact, steady and unblinking. When your band met Neanderthals, you did more than trade looks. You traded genes. Most people far from Africa will carry a small Neanderthal whisper in their cells. In some places closer to the sunrise, another whispered Denisovan will ride too, including one famous bit that helps bodies breathe high lean air, where mountains steal oxygen with a thief's grin. Historians still argue whether these meetings were rare sparks or steady coals, whether you cooperated more than competed, but the fossils of DNA. Hum the same chorus your fire does. We are not neat trees. We are braided rivers. Quirky tidbit shuffles out of the wind with a mammoth's patience. When the cold ruled the Middle Lands hard, some people built houses from the bones of those mammoths. Rings of tusk and rib hide stretched tight hearths in the middle that painted the bones honey brown with smoke. You imagine living inside a skeleton that agrees to be a roof and feel a respectful shiver that isn't the weather. Your camp prefers willow ribs and snow walls and the leeward embrace of reeds, but the principle holds. You borrow the world's shapes and persuade them to be shelter. You learn new trades for new latitudes. Bone needles thin-eyed persuasive let you stitch fur to fur with sinew thread until wind sees your seams and shrugs into feet. A child's feet become a problem. You can solve with soft inner hides, turned hair in for warmth, hair out for water. You invent a laughable gait for icy crossings and act like you meant to look that stylish. Your glue behaves differently near the coals when air is fiercely dry. You adjust the heat like a whisper, the way you did with Flint, the way you always do. You rearrange your pantry too fat, becomes a season, not a flavor. Bone marrow is currency. Dried fish sings louder than it smells. You flirt with snow the way you flirted with fire, flirting, of course being code for discipline with jokes. The old roots learn new endings. Doggerland, far to the later north, will one day drown. But for a long time it furls like a meadow between islands. People haven't named yet, and footsteps, there are common as larks. To the sunrise, great shelves that used to be forests will ask for boats when the ice loosens and the sea takes back what it lent. You stow a new caution in your cave mind. The spiral you paint near Crumble Cliffs now has an ocean cousin that says, go around coastlines that look like teeth. Your Whistling Rock keeps its notes dry in winter and damp in thaw. Your mark under it, 3 light ash kisses, changes, season by season burned. Cool leave be then, later leave be, it is wet, it is fierce. Mainstream fact taps your shoulder with a mittened hand. People reached Australia tens of thousands of years ago, 60 plus by many counts, which means somebody somewhere got serious about traveling water. Maybe it was many somebodies, many wheres. Historians still argue whether the first big leaps came from accidental rafts or deliberate crossings with gossip and snacks. But the beads and pigments and bones with holes where breath sings all point to plans, not accidents. You are not surprised. You already plan your day around wind and shadow and the honey guide's taste in trills. You keep meeting the same survival allies in new costumes. Sentinel sleep still leaves the camp never completely asleep, even when cold tries to bully you into huddling all at once. The insult the meat custom keeps luck humble in times when luck feels rare. It keeps the biggest haunch from owning the biggest voice. The Honey Guide dessert hotline works even when hives taste like winter. You pay the bird in wax with gratitude you feel in your teeth. The pebble trick in the mouth becomes the snow breath trick against frost. The ember coin in fungus becomes a coal wrapped in dried lichen and tucked beneath your sleeping skin, so morning doesn't start with regret. Jokes still work lighter wood that catches quickly. Joke 2 cracks, just enough ice to feel like sunshine. Today's forecast cold, with a chance of braggers slipping on the same rock. The camp claps politely. It's too chilly for a standing ovation. You reach a ridge, and the world unfolds, like a map the wind is trying to keep secret. Far off you can make out a herd, dark on pale bison, maybe flowing around a drifted line the way water respects stone. You mark the corridor with your eyes, the way you marked game paths with gentle fire last season. Today you won't chase. Today you'll walk the long, low arc to the copse with the good leeward face and the bent spruce that points like a nose toward safe snow. Your feet hold so many maps now you sometimes feel like a library you carry under your ankles. Night closes quick in the cold, a soft door pushed by a firm hand. The drum is quieter. The flute's breath is sharper. Song condenses in little ghosts that rise and vanish. You tuck kids under fur, test the knots on the windbreak, adjust coals like a jeweler, and watch the stars drill the sky clear. The cross tilts. Another trio you named after reeds you miss lifts its chin at the same notch in the far ridge. You think of people stepping off Beringia into enormous rooms of air they didn't yet have names for. You think of others walking seashores where kelp means supper and storm means we wait. Historians still argue Whether footprints fossilized in old lakebed mud, much farther south are 20-something thousand winters old or younger. Timelines keep rewriting themselves when new dates walk in like guests. But you don't argue with footprints. You follow them and leave your own. The baby at your chest sighs like a small kettle. Someone at the edge coughs one, he's habit, not worry. And the next watcher takes their place without waking fully. The rolling guard that is your species' lullaby. Joke 3 arrives as a drowsy grin. You aim at the dark. If hyenas were here, they'd file a complaint. The buffet moved north without proper notice. You promise to reply in spring. You rest, not because things are safe, but because you've woven enough safety to let your eyes close. The mammoth bone house in your head, the bone needle, the pebble trick, the ember coin, the eggshell archive, the spiral in the cave, the whistling rock, the honey guide's trill, the drum that edits fear into breath. Each is a stitch in the great shameless blanket you throw over bad weather and new continents. The real power people keep, calling Caveman, turns out to be the same in ice or sun, in reed beds, or on braided rivers of land, adaptability with good manners. You notice, you adjust. You share, and by morning, the world is a hair easier to live in than it was last night. That's how you cross worlds without losing yourself, and how you bring everyone you can with you, boo. Now let the breath loosen. Let the drum in your chest slow the way embers settle after a last small nudge, the way the whistling rock lets its note fade when the wind curls into sleep. You've walked far tonight, through heat and through frost. You've watched rivers make maps and stars make promises, and you've watched the circle keep its soft guard while jokes kept the air kind. You can put the tools down for a while. The hand axe can rest in its pouch. The beads can cool against your skin. The eggshell canteen can lean at a gentle angle where the light touches it and turns the scratches into tiny constellations. The cave wall is still there in the dark behind your eyes, and your palm is still pressed against it. That quiet shout, "I am here, we are here. Follow this way." The spiral still means go around. The ember coin still waits under ash for a breath that will come tomorrow without being begged. The honey guide is asleep on a warm branch, and even the hyena loud critic, accidental comedian, has curled into a comma at the edge of the paragraph and stopped laughing for a while. Let the air turn soft around your mouth. Let your shoulders slide an inch closer to the ground. If a worry wanders in, let it take a seat near the fire and warm its hands. It will be easier to talk to in the morning when the ridge shows its face and the wind points a plain, simple direction. You are in the circle, watched by eyes that, like you, covered by a sky that has practiced this lullaby for longer than anyone can remember. The fans hum, the rooms hush, the embers glow. Everything is steady now. Everything is small, patient, and friendly. Close your eyes and let the path home finish walking to you.